Assembly of Councillors. So I have not received any apologies. We'll have one apology I've been advised. Councillor Lawrence is an apology for this evening's meeting. So otherwise the membership is as listed. Item 3, do we have any disclosures or conflicts of interest?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I do have one. It's a direct conflict. I understand that there is a GB item in relation to Preston Market. Is it GB or
notice of motion?
Sorry, a notice of motion. And I have a direct conflict in that Preston Market sponsored our Munja Munja DVD, and I'll be exiting the chamber.
All right, thank you, Councillor. Other councillors? Councillor Walsh?
In relation to one of the notices of motion in regards to St George's Road, it's not an interest. It's not a conflict of interest. It's just an interest, and so I'm free to stay in the chamber and participate in the debate.
All right, Councillor.
Just one, Mr Mayor. It's just an interest. Item 9.5, due to residential amenity. I live within 150 metres of St George's Road, and I will stay for the vote and debate for that item.
All right, thank you very much. All right, councillors, that being the case, we'll proceed. Item 4, confirmation of the minutes of the previous meeting. Councillor Williams moves.
Have a second.
Councillor Fontana seconds. I've just been advised that there are 2. So we'll... yes, thank you very much. So we have 1 for the 21st of September, so I'll take both of yourselves as mover and seconder for the special council meeting, ordinary council meeting rather, of the 21st of September. So I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried. And then for the ordinary council meeting of the 5th of October. Mover? Councillor McCarthy?
I can't move it because I wasn't there.
Oh, okay. Yes. Councillor Williams, I saw your hand, so I'll take you as a mover. Councillor Fontana as a seconder. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Okay. Item 5, reports by Mayor and Councillors. So, over to you, Councillor Lee.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. And just a couple of things to report on. I obviously returned from my leave for my MacArthur Fellowship. I did meet with a number of councils in different parts of England as well as other parts of Europe, and I've gained a lot of insight, and as I expressed to our CEO and other directors, I'd be keen to provide a presentation at some stage, as well as the required report and the presentation to the MAV in due course. I also met with our new directors, Patty and Gavin, and again, welcome to the council, and attended a couple of workshops with other councillors and the executive management team, and have been answering quite a number of planning-related matters, as I'm sure all the other councillors have too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lee. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I had an absence during part of the period since the previous meeting, the 21st of September, but I've got a couple of items to report on. I attended both of the Chandler Highway duplication consultations that were held at Northcote Secondary College, and I think Councillor Walsh also attended as well. And it was great to see so many Darebin residents, even though it was held in the city of Darebin, a project that's occurring in the city of Yarra, and of course the consultation was over in Northcote, which was interesting. But there was a huge attendance from Darebin residents, a lot of very important input, very consistent with Council's own position, which is that we've advocated for a strong public transport component as part of the duplication, and obviously some concern we've expressed already about the duplication all occurring on the west side, as is being proposed, 6 lanes on the west side, which is not in keeping with the expectations of the local community. I also spoke at the launch of the Sustainable Community Leaders Program here in the City of Darebin Town Hall, and that was great to welcome the new participants in that program, along with attending the Rossmoyne Rummage and Scarecrow judging competition, and various council briefings, planning committee meetings, and of course meeting with our new directors, and I'd like to also extend my welcome to them both as well.
All right, thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Williams.
I've just attended a few items regarding campus and Preston Business Advisory Committee high tea at Parliament House. It was lovely to meet with Linda, the female governor, and a few special briefing sessions and some council workshops. That was it. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Councillor Williams. Councillor Fontana.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I might just speak about one item in relation to I actually attended a VCAT listing day several weeks ago in order to observe proceedings on a planning matter. And it was very important to understand the process of in particular the debate from both sides and how arguments presented, and to get a better understanding of the relevant information needed to actually present the argument in relation to policies and strategies. And one of the items, one of the matters I attended was the Melissa Cakes versus Council's decision to embark on certain conditions, and the expert witnesses were relied upon and how those arguments presented. And I'm happy to say that we actually go in with quite good representation at these cases, as is very important to ensure that what decision we make is defended to the best of our ability. So I did enjoy that day. I know some councils have been to VCAT hearings. I do encourage others to go to understand the processes and get an appreciation of what's involved in order to ensure our decisions are upheld.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fontana. Councillor Walsh.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I attended the a couple of things which I'll mention. The first thing I'll mention is the not part of it as part of my duties as council's rep on the DECL board. It was good to go on a tour with the chair of the coalition's jobs and business committee, which is of course Graham Watt, and everyone will be everyone in this chamber will be aware that that was particularly good for me, given the member for Build is a good friend and of course a former boss, so it was good to so that was good. Attended the Chandler Highway Bridge at Northcote Town Hall, as Councillor McCarthy mentioned, and good to see so many Darebin residents, but also noting the significant amount of residents from 4 cities, of course Darebin, Yarra, Banyule and Burundara. So that was good, because it's obviously going to be a big project when it happens. They also met with, also went to the Whittlesea Millwall on Saturday evening for the Whittlesea Mayor, who is a friend of mine, Councillor Ricky Kirkham, and I think that's about it. The rest are all listed.
All right, thank you very much, Councillor Walsh. Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My activities are up there, but I'll just concentrate on one that I think is worthy to single out, and that's that I assisted with interviews where we ran trial interviews, and you yourself was there, Mr Mayor, where we ran trial interviews with school leaver students at the former NMIT here down in St George's Road, and basically that was a program to provide experience to young school leavers and techniques of how to conduct themselves in interview in order to optimise their chances in getting a job. It's an important initiative, as you recognised on the day, Mr Mayor, in that we have high unemployment of young people
Yes.
in the northern suburbs. It's actually it's actually a bit of a sleeper, the issue of high unemployment in the northern suburbs, and this was all part of a youth job campaign of which the Darebin Council is a part of, and I was really proud to offer my little contribution in assisting young people in acquiring some new skills.
Well done, Councillor Greco. Councillor Villa.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll just note a couple of points. The Great Edwards Lake Park Walk, which took place on Saturday, which you were there and opened. Just to provide some context, this month is Safety Month at Darebin City Council. So this particular event is an annual event, and it was there is I think the theme this year was in relation to safety, is to make a stand in the community that that there is zero tolerance of violence against women, and that Darebin City Council is really in the forefront, of which we are all proud, in advancing awareness around this particular issue, and also in supporting service providers, etc., etc. So, and it was a great day. It was very well attended. I've been to a few, and I think Saturday's one was the most well attended, which suggests that it's increase in support. I think the fact that it's on a Saturday has I think made it more family friendly, and there were lots of families there. I do in particular want to thank the officers, because it was very well organised. A lot of effort goes into such events, and there was entertainment for the kids, and it was so that ritual walk around Edwards Lake became a bit of a real kind of journey and adventure, and there was entertainment along the way. So it was a great day. We also put on a kind of a barbecue for the community, and I was really pleased that we had lots of food. You know, we had lots of food, and I think that's always a very good sign. And the residents loved it. So I just want to congratulate council, and anything that we do in that space. Anything we do in that, and also I have to note, Mr. Mayor, that there was, I think you were there, lots of men and women.
Yes.
And the people who were there really represented our diverse communities. So it was really very, very positive, and so congratulations to all involved. The other point I want to make is, on Saturday I had the pleasure of going to the Preston Lions Club there in Reservoir. The name of the reserve is, Councillor, help me out.
Connor.
Thank you. Connor's, I can't keep up with all the reserves. Connor's Reserve. And Mr. Mayor, this club has come a long way. It has come a long way. There was a 2-day or 3-day tournament where they had, at that particular reserve, over 165 games over 3 days, and when I was there Saturday afternoon, there were 4 ovals being used simultaneously, and people were coming from across the state, you know, other teams to partake, and I was very proud of the way the club had organised that fairly significant event, and also looks good on council, Darebin City Council, but in particular the professionalism and just the growth in that club over the last couple of years has been very, very impressive, and I just wanted to inform you of that. It was a fairly significant event, that sometimes such events just get lost, you know, we get lost under the radar. We're not aware of them, and they really do add value, I think, Mr. Mayor, not just to the community generally, but we see the value of the money that council money, ratepayers' money invested in those clubs, when you see the good things that they do. So I was particularly proud of the work that club's doing with the assistance of council's investment in their resources. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Villa. My items are there on screen. I suppose just picking up on the theme from Councillor Villa, I think we had a pretty good weekend and a pretty good launch, and Darebin City Council making a statement in relation to where it stands in relation to the blight associated with violence against women. And it's a community concern, and one in which, sadly, our statistics for this year within the City of Darebin had increased. So our relationship and our partnership approach with Victoria Police and our various stakeholders within the community, in the context of the Municipal Emergency Planning Committee, is an essential part of addressing these things, because there needs to be a forum in which these issues are addressed, and from there, of course, the kind of action plans that may arise from them. So we do have various forums outside of seminal moments like what took place on the weekend, in terms of making a public exhibition in terms of where we stand on this issue. And it was a good event and well attended. I also want to recognise, apart from the presence of ourselves on the day, also Ms Fiona Patton, who's the upper house member for this region as well. I must say she's pretty proactive in terms of turning up to Darebin related events, and I just want to acknowledge her support. Now, one other item that I would pick out here is the attendance with myself and Mr Dev, former Premier John Cain and his son. They wanted to take up a meeting in relation to issues associated with the John Cain Memorial, what kind of programs we have in place, certainly in terms of improving the amenities down there, and going forward what plans we have. And so we were very pleased to announce, certainly in terms of their arrival, which had preceded, of course, Council's determination to choose John Cain Memorial as the siting of the multi-purpose sports stadium for that particular venue. So as part of a grander master plan, one which we've got on the shelf at the moment, but will of course be reinvigorated. You know, obviously they're taking a pretty keen interest, given the fact that the naming of the venue is after Mr. Cain's father, and they take a pretty keen interest in terms of what council will do, not just of itself but also with the stakeholders to improve the amenity going forward. And so we're quite privileged in this position now, having the council come with us to cite that as yet another down payment in terms of making that a premier facility within the City of Darebin with sports, but with a particular emphasis in this instance in improving the participation of women and girls in sport. And I think that's an important thing. So I suppose those two items I just wanted to highlight, because it just sort of demonstrates this council's capacity not only to demonstrate what it can do in relation to the broader community, but specifically in relation to gender equality. So I'll leave it at that, but it would be remiss just to say that this is my last meeting as your mayor before the statutory declaration meeting. It's come, I think, much faster than I thought it would. It's been a very interesting ride, so to speak. Supersonic travel certainly springs to mind. I think ST has my initials in it somewhere there, so I want to thank all, and I just don't mean my councillor colleagues for their forbearance during what has been a very interesting year, but also the community. I think in the end, in focusing on why we are here, and that is the delivery of services for our great community, is the one thing that binds us. And it's the social contract that essentially is there for us every 4 years. And it is for those who intend to resubmit themselves to the will of the people an opportunity to renew their social contract, a form, in some respects, not just social, but of an employment contract. And that is the understanding that the delivery of what we aim to achieve over 4 years, above and everything else, is for the betterment of this great city. I've seen some fantastic improvements since 1996, and I can assure you of one thing. If the day comes and I've been ordered back to barracks, so to speak, in 2016, for sure there will be pangs. But over a span of almost 20 years and 2 terms as mayor, I can assure you I'm very, very proud. This city has got a lot of promise and a lot of potential. I've seen some fantastic changes, and we have been at the forefront working with this great organisation in order to deliver not just the services that this city depends on, but in innovation and leadership that other local government networks are looking at Darebin, looking to partner with us in terms of creating critical mass. And as I've said in other forums, and I'll say it here to conclude my remarks, whether on this council or off, and I look forward to the development of this great city of ours, because I can assure you this is a fantastic place to live, and I wouldn't choose anywhere else to live other than Darebin. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Mr. Mayor, on indulgence, I would like to, as the Deputy Mayor of this city, congratulate you on your 12 months as well.
Thank you very much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin with the next item, which is, of course, public question time. We do, of course, afford half an hour for public questions. If in the end, owing to any technical nature associated with your questions, please do take the opportunity of using your yellow forms, putting your details, and we'll endeavour to get back to you in writing to address the nature of your questions. So, can I please have the first question? Yes, Mr. Rocky, just here at the front.
Chris Olson from Preston. I have been in the process of, I just want to talk about a little bit of background before I ask my question, because I think that's relevant. A couple of doors up from me, there's been a new development, a 3-storey. And to my dismay, there was these solar hot water panels installed on the top. So I've inquired at planning about these and was eventually, after I've rung several times, put onto an enforcement officer who tells me that my complaint will go to the developer, and then he will apply for a variation to council regulation. These things are, in my view, an eyesore. They were not on the original plan of what council has approved, and they would be adding to the essential mass and bulk of the building, in my view. So my question is, how many variations to approved plans have been granted in the last 12 months?
Well, I can answer generally. I wouldn't have those figures, as you can appreciate, off the top. But it has been the case in the past where retrospective approvals have been sought and have been granted. I don't think, just speaking personally, that it's an ideal arrangement, and I wouldn't necessarily excuse it, but I think a sense of proportion in terms of what has been asked for retrospective approval needs to be had. There has only been one item that I can recall in the last possibly 10 to 12 years in which I thought was way off the scale in terms of council's tolerance to accept a retrospective approval. And I might say that council, with myself leading at the forefront, rejected that retrospective approval because it was an outrageous and flagrant breach of what council had mandated in that specific area, and that person deliberately went against council policy to build what he built in defiance of council's stated plan for that particular area. I don't know what happened to it, but I can assure you one thing: I wasn't going to be party to a circumstance in which that sort of cowboy attitude was going to be tolerated by this council. Now, with respect to some of these smaller ones, it's not, as I said, not one that has not been part of our custom and practice to consider in order to stay away from a litigious sort of line in terms of coming down, pretty hard on those who've transgressed. So, where the circumstance has been reported to the council, where an installation has been done in outside of whatever has been approved as part of the remit of the permit, it's not beyond our past experiences where those people have been asked to comply by putting in an application for retrospective approval. With respect to the treatment of them, if I can address that part in terms of the visual aspect, it is true to say that where they are originally proposed, there have been treatments sought in terms of how they may be shielded from the street face, how they may be yet housed in terms of the roofing structure that's been proposed. I think it'd be fair to say that in terms of their overall look, they may not be everyone's cup of tea, but they are necessary evil in terms of the environmental component or benefits that they achieve.
My other comment might be, and question might be, are we expected to see more of these on Plenty Road in the future on top of 6-storey developments?
Well, if I can just sort of deal with the matter more in general sense rather than just Plenty Road specifically, I think just as part of our overall approach in terms of the treatments associated with high densities along those major corridors, the one thing that we're mindful, of course, is not just in terms of its physical form, the setbacks that we may get desire as a council, and certainly looking at cooperation with the state government in terms of trying to get these amendments to receive approval, but it's also the other elements that form, I suppose, incidentally, as part of the overall design component, because I think people sometimes think that these installations are separate too, but they are very much related to the projects themselves. So if we're looking at an overall package, it may be considered by others to be a lower order one, but it is part of the design facet. So how they're treated, how they're actually designed in such a fashion to be fully optimal in terms of what they're designed to do, which is capture the array and feed all sorts of systems through it. It's the impact on the amenity more broadly, and I'm sure that it's a fine balancing act, but I have confidence in our officers in ensuring that they know that they have a matrix at their disposal in terms of how they are treated as far as the final design permit requirements are concerned. It's a complex business. I make no apologies for that, and you would appreciate the complexity. And I think the community more broadly understands the complexity, but I think we've done a pretty good job over the journey in managing these complexities. And, you know, when you consider something like 2,500 applications sometimes a year, and only very few that come towards the planning committee, I think it suggests that we're doing something right. Yeah, next question. Just next door there, Ms. Rocky.
Sorry, I'm Maria Polesci, I live in Preston. And with all due respect, Mr Mayor, I think you kind of missed the point, really. The problem that we have is that we see plans for developments when they're advertised, we develop objections to them, we look at them, we make sure that, you know, that we kind of, as much as possible, they're built to standards that council set and standards that we want to see upheld. And then there is a process post that where developers, I'll get to the question, where developers...
But you're eating into other people's time with preambles.
Sorry, I will be very quick, but they seem to be saying go ahead. Where there are additions and there isn't a process by which residents and objectors get to see what's going on, other than if they look out the window or how they're approved or whether they're approved. So my question to you is, will council call for a report for the last 12 months to show how many additions to developments have been agreed to by the planners and what they look like?
Well, I mean, it's up to individual councillors. I don't think it's a problem. But as I say, from my own understanding in terms of these retrospective approvals, they're not like as if they dominate a lot of these applications. And it's not up to me. It's up to the councillors. So they're free to do so. But I'm giving you my personal perspective, because I don't want to just simply say it's up to the councillors, that I have not seen to suggest some kind of alarmism on that front. And I think on that basis I would reject the premise of the question if you suggest that somewhere that it is an alarm situation. Bearing in mind that a retrospective approval needs to be sanctioned by council, and in so doing it may well be that it comes towards the planning committee. As I say, they are far and few between. So I would ask you to consider that in the context of keeping a sense of perspective and not peddling to some kind of alarmist tone, because it simply is not the case that the council does not have full purview of when those retrospective considerations are brought to council. And if they are of significance, they are brought before the planning committee. So there is proper oversight. And if you've been following, and I'm sure, and knowing the organisation that you represent, you've been following it, that hardly any of them come before the planning committee. They're very, very rare items. Of close to 100 items, potentially, in any given year that the planning committee considers, I think I can only recall one or two, and that's a very small number. So I'm very happy. Now, sorry, the lady just at the back. Just wait for so everyone can hear.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I just had a point of clarification about something you said earlier in response to this gentleman's question.
Your name, sorry?
Ros Lethbridge. I'm a resident of Northcote.
I didn't recognise you there. How are you, Ros?
I'm very well, thank you. Just a point of clarification on what you said to this gentleman, that in your history of you having been on council, you could remember one retrospective permit that had not been granted by council?
I think that's
Is
the
that
one.
my understanding?
I think that's the one that I talked about. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
I can imagine the one you're talking about, probably Helen Street, but
That's
I don't
right.
know.
That's the one.
I guess my question is, it does seem somewhat alarmist to me that in the history of your time on council, you can only remember one not being granted retrospectively, because it suggests to me anyway that council's choosing to subrogate the rights of residents to those of the developers.
I don't
That's my
know.
observation.
I don't know where you're going with that. So please get to your question.
I'm not going getting anywhere. My question was to clarify that there'd only been one in your memory that you could recall had been retrospectively approved by council.
Well, I identified that one, and I was at the forefront of knocking it off. So I don't know what you're talking about.
It was just a point of clarification, Mr Mayor. I don't mean to be rude. I was just asking whether there was only one recollection of one.
I know that we've clarified for both of each other. Do you have a question?
I've asked my question and you've responded to it.
So we'll move on to somebody else then. Thank you. The gentleman just there, Mr. Rocky. Yep.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. My name is Steve Simeon. I'm President of the Five Fancy Canary Club of Victoria and I live in the Preston Council. My question to you is the price hike that's been placed on non-profit clubs in the area. Our prices on hall hire or venue hire has gone from $7.50 to $25 an hour. So that's my question to the council. Why has this happened to us?
All right. Thanks very much for your question, Steve. I mean, obviously, every year the fees and charges the council charges is reviewed, and obviously there's a standard mechanism in which CPI is considered in terms of those movements. But at the same time, there are also schedules that our officers follow in terms of special considerations that are given to clubs. So it may well be, say, for instance, a compliment concerning our core communities, or, for instance, the fact that they relate to some of our council policies, whether they be in regards to women or whether they be in regards to a juniors component. So there's a matrix in which our officers use in order to discount those fees. So it may well be that just in the context of your question, to use the yellow form, identify your club, and see whether, for instance, your club falls within that category of looking at special consideration for those fees. But it is true to say that the fees do keep up in line with our CPI increase.
We were formed incorporated in this area back in 1995, but we've been paying the same fees in that time. But I'd say it's only happened in the last week or so that we've been notified. It hasn't gone up by a few dollars. It's gone up from $7.50 to $25 an hour. We're a small club in the area here. We represent the area, so and we're finding that some of the venues are a lot cheaper within the same council area. Why is that?
Well, as I say, because I don't have those technical details, it might be an opportunity for you to use the yellow form, and we'll get back to you in writing.
Yes, please, I would prefer that.
All right, thank you very much for your question, Steve. Now, Mr. Rocky.
Thank you very much.
No worries, thank you. Mr. Rocky, right at the back. Yep.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Councillors. My name is Andrew Schidmack. I'm a resident of Northcote. My question has to do with one of the matters that's been delivered tonight. For those that maybe aren't across the whole case, I'll give you a very short background. We moved into our house in 2013. We had no idea that the neighbour had applied to discontinue part of our backyard and purchase part of it. Despite a very strong case for adverse possession, including over 40 years of possession by us and our predecessors, we actually offered to buy the whole property from council in order to give the money to council and to not give it to lawyers and undertake a complex adverse possession case. We're told this is not an option and to pay $20,000 or lose part of our backyard. You can imagine our surprise when we actually came across a version of the policy which not only gave preference to occupiers of the land as the first right of refusal to buy it, but also a discount on the price. As I might have stated, we offered to pay full market value. Furthermore, I might also add that on for agenda item this evening, it clearly does actually acknowledge that the former policy gave entitlements to occupier preference and discounts the market value, which is again not in line with the policy that we've been told about and we keep getting.
Mr. Shoemaker,
so my question is, the submission I made to Council, I raised a number of serious issues relating to the legitimacy of the policy under which this matter is being considered and the actions of Council and Council officers being not consistent with the legitimate policy. Furthermore, all public available information provided to Council has been written in such a way as to elicit a certain outcome rather than provide objective information. Why is this matter being considered and voted on this evening when such matters are still yet to be resolved and I've received no follow-up information about the serious matters I raised?
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Shoemaker. I should have mentioned at the outset that any items that are on the agenda itself I can't answer, so as not to...
On the top of this yellow form...
Yeah, look, no. Mr. Shoemaker, please, please, you've asked the question, and you'll have to have respect for the way that the meeting runs. I can't, because it's part of our local governance law, that I can't preempt the debate or steer in a space that may yet preempt the debate. Given your item that you have an interest in is on the agenda, you'll have to wait until that item is discussed by the councillors. Now, I can't answer your question.
You gave me an opportunity to make a submission. I raised very serious concerns and issues and allegations in that submission that has not been responded to and that has not been referenced or included in the report tonight. Furthermore, it says, anticipate your question will be responded verbally at the meeting. So it doesn't seem like you can't. I've raised a serious question about something being deliberated tonight.
And I Mr. Shoemaker, I appreciate your interest in this, but you must understand at the same time that I would be prejudicing the debate.
You're not prejudicing the debate, you're providing
the interpretation...
information to the debate without which the debate cannot be legitimately undertaken.
I really can't engage in this sort of debate. You'll either wait until the debate is had, or I don't know where we're going with this. Well, I'm sorry.
I haven't been given any response to very serious issues that I've raised.
Well,
where's the time for this to be done? If you vote tonight, the vote's done and it's over.
Well, look, I appreciate your sensitivity, but I'm in a bind. I don't...
Would you like to open the other councillors?
Well, it doesn't work that way, Mr. Shoemaker. With all due respect, it doesn't work that way. Right?
Might be responded to by the mayor, other councillors or councillors?
No, Mr. Shoemaker, it means post facto, not during the course of the meeting. So please, I can't really enter a debate with you, given the fact that the item is here. Now, I appreciate...
the whole problem with poor governance in this place, and how dare you talk about this being such a great place?
Well, I mean, Mr. Shoemaker, I don't need to tolerate your tone, nor do I appreciate it. If you can't relax, then I ask you to leave, because you're disrupting the meeting, and I don't think any of us needs to tolerate that sort of grief. Now, you wait until the... Well, Mr. Shoemaker, I mean, I don't know why you're making it so personal. So if you can't control yourself, I would ask for you to consider leaving.
It's a very personal matter to me, which is not being considered properly by the council. That's why I'm not being emotional. I'm stating...
I think you are.
Please don't dismiss me like that.
I'm going to ask for time out. If Councillor Walsh might take the chair.
Yep. What's his name? Mr. Schumacher, I've been advised that there may be a further amendment, so we can hopefully hear the debate later on. So I will now call the next question.
Before you do, Acting Chair, is it possible just to get a technical answer from the officers via the CEO to one of the questions that Mr. Schumacher asked, which I'm just conscious that we won't get a chance to ask during the debate?
No, I understand that, Councillor McCarthy. I will ask our governance officers. Mr. Dev.
think there is going to be a debate about possible postponement of this particular one because there's going to be an amendment today. So we'll wait for the discussion, and I think the councillors are listening to you, so they will react accordingly. So bear with us, and we will move on.
Okay. Can I call the next question, please? Mr. Coffey.
Keith Coffey, Reservoir. I'm just supporting Steve's statement about the fees. Now, the question is that one department's not talking to the other department, and it's gone from leisure to business. That's, they reckon, everything's a business proposition these days. And as a result of that, you've got people like Steve's Club and other clubs, which I've been handling for a long time, coming up with these problems. That's why I told him to come here tonight. But he didn't mention how he'd get the runaround from one department to the other saying, oh, that's a business plan, it's nothing to do with leisure anymore.
Sure, Mr. Coffey. Could I draw you to your question?
Because I see what rings the alarm bells with me. I read in last fortnight's paper where the community halls are going to get leases, and knowing how the leases work, they started off as a peppercorn one a long time ago.
Thanks, Mr. Coffey. I really do need to draw you to your question.
Your councillors know the true facts of what's happening. And that is my question. Did you understand what I'm trying to say? Because that's what's causing the problem with all these non-profit clubs.
Thank you very much, Mr. Coffey, and that has been, from a councillor's perspective, that has been noted. Do I have any, Mr. Nugent?
John Nugent, Epping. In support of these two gentlemen, my football club that I was associated with, its fees last year was $642 and jumped to $2,940. We received a maximum of 50% rebate, which brought it down to $1,470. That's the maximum rebate we have. We're in a social economical area and so forth, and Councillor Lawrence was going to do something about it, put a general business item in and so forth. But I have not heard one person whose fees have not gone up by
Mr. Coffey, could I draw you to your question?
Yes, I'll get to my question. What are you as a council going to do about these non-profit organisation clubs that are being hit with over 130% increase? Originally it was 430%, with a 50% discount, brought it down to 130% discount, brought down a fee rise of 130%.
I'm going to have to, Mr. Nugent, I'm going to have to draw you to your question because there are no questions.
My question is, what is council going to do about such a large increase to a non-profit organisation club?
I'll take that on notice, but I will ask our CEO, Mr. Dev, to provide further comments.
Mr. Mayor, the council fees are set by council. However, they will look at any impact. So, the particular gentleman who raised the question, we will definitely contact and get the feedback, and we will provide it to the council. Mr. Nugent, and we have provided that answer, but if you're not happy, we'll talk to you further. The club has asked us to speak to them directly. They have written to us. So we are doing that at the moment. But we are generally, any impact, we will take it to the council. We'll definitely take that gentleman's issue to the council, and we'll in the briefing, and we'll discuss that as well when we get the details here.
That's fine, Mr. Dev. I just want to say one thing. I wasn't even going to originally ask this question. It's just that I heard this gentleman complain, and I thought, I'm not the only one or the only football club. My relationship with the Colonel Park Stars Junior Football Club is no longer. So I'll still be asking questions, but it won't be about the Colonel Park Stars Junior Football Club. I'd like to put that on record as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nugent. Next question. All right, well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We'll proceed with the meeting. Thanks very much for your questions. Now, we're up to item 7, councillors. 7.1, assemblies of councillors.
I have to move, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Fontana moves. Councillor Walsh seconds. Councillor Fontana?
Nothing to comment on.
All right, I propose to put that to vote. All those in favour? And it's carried. Thank you very much. Now, item 8, 8.1, annual general report.
Happy to move it, Mr. Mayor.
I'll second.
Councillor Gregor seconds. Councillor Villa?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, this is a fairly substantial document here, which makes up 90%.
So, sorry, Mr. Mayor. When my time comes, I'm going to have to put some amendments to this, which I have spoken to our governance manager about. And I've spoken to Ms. Stevens and Mr. Dev about this.
Yes. Well, what we'll do at the right time, I'll give you the call. But Councillor Villa has the call.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, this is for the benefit of those maybe in the gallery. Just a bit of context. The annual report that we have here before us tonight, 2014-2015, is basically our legal obligation under the Act that we are required to provide to the state government an annual report, and it needs to be and there's a timeline, etc., etc. The summary of the information contained looks at the summary, our strategic framework, against the Darebin City Council plan, whether we're working towards what we have told the community that we are going to do, our key priorities, etc. So basically, and it also goes into our staffing profile. It goes into basically our major projects. It contains a significant amount of information. It talks about all our different strategies, of which there are many, and our strategies underpin our strategic direction, and we work towards the objectives in the strategies. So basically, Mr. Mayor, what it is a report card, but more than that, it actually tells the community and the minister what we do. Now, I think the challenge with a document like this, Mr. Mayor, is to ask yourself, does anybody actually read it? Apart from, maybe the minister's staff and all of that, and obviously us as councillors and the officers. And I think one of the challenges is, this kind of information that the community needs to know about. And one of our biggest challenges is how do we get such critical information which therefore can inform residents in their ability to participate in council's decision-making process and hold us to account. So, reading this document, which is a very, very important document, has our financial report, etc., and where we're tracking well, areas where we can improve on, all that. I think it's a very dense, important document, and I think to myself, how do we get this information out there in manageable bits, comprehensible bits, relevant bits to the community? I always, struggle with that. We have to meet our legislative requirements, which means producing a document like this, and then the challenges we've discussed as councillors, how do we get this information out there? But I suppose that's a discussion for another day. But be that as it may, Mr. Mayor, I want to acknowledge formally the work done by officers to put this document together. I encourage residents and interested community members to read it. But also, Mr. Mayor, I was just reminded, after all we go through and all the deliberations and the issues, just to go back and remind ourselves of our mission. Which is, what this document also forced me to do, that yes, Darebin, the place to live. what our mission is, working with our diverse community to build a sustainable and livable city. And every now and then I think we have to, as an organisation, remind ourselves, okay, what are our values? And we need to be guided by our values, and we need to come back and remind ourselves of our values, because sometimes in any organisation, you can lose your way. So, and I also want to note, Mr Mayor, there's your report and talk of the achievements. I also want to note Mr Dev's report and noting that, yes, there have been some governance issues, as Mr Dev notes, and that we are, working towards them. I think it's important to put it out there, and I was happy to see that. I also think it's very important to note, Mr Mayor, and this was in Mr Dev's report, that there are going to be significant changes to aged services, and I think this is something that we need to ensure that we engage the community in the discussion. I don't think there's been a lot said, but as you know, we've got an ageing community, and aged services, if you have a look at our budget, Mr Mayor, we as a council are very proud of the investment that we put in aged care services, and I think we're one of the councils that keep it in-house, because we know that residents trust council, especially the vulnerable. So I was pleased to see that Mr Dev noted that, and it reminded me when I read it, yes, we need to make sure that we do, the due diligence on this, getting the community involved and making sure that there is a significant amount of awareness around this, because the changes are going to be quite significant, and we need to make sure we do the right thing. So it's a good report card, good reminder for ourselves, and the challenge is, how do we communicate this to the community? Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bellella. Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, just following on from what Councillor Bellella said, I just want to give sort of an overview of the annual report. It's an important document. It's basically the scorecard for the council, and the annual scorecard. And what an annual report contains is not only the financial data about how we've financially tracked over 12 months, but also the non-financial aspects of the council. And Councillor Bella's covered off on some of those things. Well, given that it is an annual report and that numbers are reported, I just want to run through some of the broad numbers in relation to the annual report. Firstly, this council had a total income of over $157 million, which is steadily increasing. It's almost the same as last year in terms of total income, and we had a surplus of about $5.5 million in this financial year, and there are some adjustments to that surplus for accounting reasons. Also, I think it's important to note that in relation to capital works, the council spent over $33.5 million in relation to capital works, which was a slight increase in relation to the capital work spend of last year. And as noted in your report, Mr Mayor, in your statement at the front of some of the key capital works programs that we've engaged in over the last 12 months have been the Reservoir Library of $8 million, which has finally been delivered. Also, the multi-sport stadium, we've actually kicked off the process there. That's actually a project that's worth about $13 million, but we've put, if you like, a down deposit on getting that moving. And also the other important Solar Savers Mark II program, which is again another $1 million that the council, and there's some of the highlights in relation to what we've done. Of that 157 million, about 107 million is actually collected from rates of our ratepayers, and the other 50 million comes in the form of revenue from council, and also the diminishing grants that we get from both state and federal government. I think it's important to note that the points that Councillor Bellella said, that this document is not only a numbers document, but also it's a document that sets out a little bit about what the council has done over the last 12 months, also in relation to non-financial matters. And Mr Mayor, one statistic that actually struck me again, and it keeps striking me each year, and I hope that each year it gets better. And I'll finish off on this, Mr Mayor, is that, and why I'm mentioning this is that this should inform us in the future, that 24% of households in the city of Darebin live below the poverty line. That's a staggering figure, Mr. Mayor. And that 23% are also without internet. You know, so unfortunately we have a Wi-Fi, a free Wi-Fi program. And the only other final point I'd like to make is obviously...
Mr. Thomas, explain.
And I'll finish on this, Mr. Mayor, because it's an important document, so we should dedicate, is to thank the officers.
Yes.
But the only observation I'll make about this document is that whilst it presents all the positives about council, I think we should have the courage to present some of the challenges that council face and some of the difficulties that council has had in the last financial year, because I think that shows corporate honesty in relation to the community, because we're not all perfect, and we should be right up front and say what we did well and what we didn't do well and hope to improve in future years. So I hope to see something like that, even though it's not a legislative requirement, but I really would like to see something like that in future annual reports.
It may be an innovation that we work to. Thank you, Councillor Greco. Councillor Walsh?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I've got an amendment that on page 20, for page 25 of the annual report, that Councillor Walsh was the council representative on the Inner Northern Training Group, and Councillor Walsh also represented council on the Metropolitan Transport Forum and the Metropolitan Waste Management Group.
All right. That's accepted by the mover and seconder.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I too will speak, obviously, in favour of this, because the report does present a good picture for council. We have done. We've worked towards our council plan, delivering a strong and innovative local economy, support for cultural organisations, and we've also, on an operational level, work cover claims have been down at Darabin, so although that is an operational level, we must acknowledge the work of the executive management team in that regard as well. So that's about it. I'll leave it to other councillors.
All right. Councillor Lee.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just following from Councillor Walsh, I think we do need to review the committee representation on pages 24 and 25, because it actually covers two statutory meeting terms. So I think the committee membership, as listed in the annual report, reflects the second half of 2015, does not reflect the latter half of, sorry, the first half of 2015 did not reflect the latter half of 2014. So perhaps some fine tweaking is probably required before it gets finalised.
I think you'll probably, point of order, I am told that we do need to we would need to do amendments tonight, if I'm not correct, because this has already been sent to the minister, so we would need to endorse this with notes.
Yeah, that's correct. We will have a meeting, but however, in our web page we'll make that and make a separate statement. These are the total attached to the.
Sure. So, just further on from Mr. Dev's advice, should we propose the amendment right now or after the meeting?
Mr. Dev?
If you would like, in any way.
I can nominate two committees that I served on the latter half of 2014, which is the Metropolitan Transport Forum and the Metropolitan Waste Management Group.
All right. So, what I might get you to do, Councillor Lee, is just hand a note to the minute takers so that they can report that. Yes. Any other councillors who might have committees?
I was just going to propose, Mr. Mayor, if it's possible to add a line to the motion, to the recommendation, which would simply be and make necessary adjustments to be signed off by the CEO in relation to correcting councillor profiles.
Sounds good.
Because there are three other things missing, I've just noticed, and I don't think we should be doing that in the chamber.
No. All right, good. And that's accepted by the mover and seconder. So, I just want to say one thing before we put it to the vote. Just in terms of the statement of account, I suppose, in terms of the year that's gone past, Councillor Greco notes rightly in terms of the breadth of the achievements across the year, and we should be proud of them. What I would draw people's attention to, when I included the Solar Savers component to my statement, that preceded the Premier's announcement that we had been named as finalists in the Sustainability Award in 2 categories, one for environmental justice and the other one for government. So we were, I was quite prescient in actually noting that, because it is a leadership program. And it's one that has received recognition before, certainly within the local government professionals circles in terms of the award that we had achieved for the same program, but this one tops it all. To receive recognition from the Premier, and hopefully on the 29th of October, when we go down there tour de force, as part of Darebin's representation to the gala night, that we'll be taking at least one of those awards away with us. And I look forward to the development of this program, because I think it's got some exciting things going for it. And all the while, if you note at the top of page 14, councillors, how we're going to be doing this within the challenging environment going forward in the context of rate capping. So that's going to be the challenge for us. But I'm pretty confident, and I've said this before, even at the outset when rate capping was in the offing, that the challenge for us now, if the challenge wasn't there already, is to align what we're doing with the state government in order to achieve exemptions above the cap. And that's going to be our challenge. But this city has had a tendency of coming up with the goods in terms of the development of infrastructure and services towards that end. So I draw your attention, of course, to the completion of the Keon Park Community Hub, Northern East Community Hub, and of course, just in recent times, as Councillor Greco mentioned, the opening of the Reservoir Learning Community Centre. So we've got some runs on the board, and of course the multi-sport stadium is the next instalment towards that. We have $6.5 million in the kitty already towards that program, and its contingent spend, looking at somewhere in the regions of 13 million, and perhaps towards its completion date between 2018 and 2020, it may well be that it tops 20 million. But I can assure you one thing, premier facilities within this city for a growing community, and one which will have expectations and demands of modern facilities to meet the expectations of our community. I can assure you this council is at the vanguard of steering a path towards that objective. So, councillors, it is with much pride that I too endorse the annual report and the good work that this organisation does, and I salute our officers in terms of trying to meet the expectations and the will of this council and the expectations of our community in a more general sense. So I propose to put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Now, we are up to 8.2, which is progress report and council strategies. Councillor?
Happy to move that.
Moved by Councillor Lee.
Happy to second.
Seconded by Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Lee.
Yes, thank you. This timely follows on from our annual report, because lying behind that report, and indeed our council plan, is a whole series of strategies and policies. And as the report highlights, there are 35 strategies that has been reported upon. I'll just highlight two that are close to my heart. One is the active and ageing policy, which is under pressure, as previous councillors have noted. The federal government has implemented a whole series of national aged care reforms as of July this year, and the impact of that is yet to be felt, and no doubt it will be felt at a local level, including the City of Darebin. As well as that, we have the rollout of the National Disability Insurance Scheme, and if you read through our annual report, we do have a significant number of population in our municipality in the aged care and also the disability sector. So no doubt those two significant national reforms will have some sort of impact on Darebin, and we all need to be prepared for that. The other strategy which I'd like to just briefly highlight is the cycling strategy. As the update notes, we have an annual increase of 3% over the last 10 years, going back the last 10 years, and the Australia's first solar-powered bike counter installed at the end of St George's Road has clocked up over 500,000 trips already. That's a significant saving, not only to the environment, but also to the infrastructure along St George's Road, and also significant saving for people like metro trains and also Yarra trams. So when we do look at the upgrade of the Melbourne Waterworks down middle of St George's Road in the coming months, we hope that all stakeholders will recognise that very significant figure that we have saved of their troops and their infrastructure, and perhaps work in partnership with us rather than going against us, as many of those, as some of the past history have shown. And we're hopeful that our council will be able to work with major stakeholders such as Melbourne Water, Yarra Trams and Metro Trains and Vic Roads to not only maintain that vital piece of infrastructure down Middle St George Road, but also upgrade it and eventually duplicate it. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lee. Councillor McCarthy.
In the interest of time, I just wanted to highlight one thing, Mr Mayor, and it's dear to my heart, and I know to yours as well, as the chair of the committee, which is some great progress against our Aboriginal Action Plan, which we adopted in 2012 and implemented in 2013. It was supposed to come to an end this year, and because we have sought to align that action plan with the next stage of the council plan and the municipal public health and wellbeing plan, and through consultation with the Darebin Aboriginal Advisory Committee, looking to continue the current plan into 2017, so the next council actually has some involvement, some carriage, and of course that it's connected to our council plan. I make that point because it's easy for us to talk about our work with our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community at the significant weeks, but I think it's really important to recognise that action plan as one of the key plans that we have in place, which distinguishes us from other councils, but I think it also means that we have a responsibility increasingly to help other councils do that work, because we've done it for so long here in Darebin, preceding all of our time, I imagine, over many decades, in fact, going back to Doug Nicholls' time in the area. So I just want to make that point because I think it's easy for us to just see these as action plans, but some of them have great relevance. And one of the small outcomes of that, and I think it means a lot to the Wurundjeri Tribe and Heritage Land Council, is that we now have a recognition plate on 85% of our buildings, which is great. I'd like to see that we get to 100% before the end of this term. And of course we've launched the Stolen Generations Marker, which has been a project that has gone on for many years. Extensive consultation. Sorry?
Right in front.
Right at the front, and in a prominent place in the city. So it's really important to recognise those pieces of work. And lastly, I think it's just worth noting that the work that we've been doing at the community level in terms of re-engaging community around our creek corridors, street tree planting, these sorts of issues. It's ongoing work, but our strategies and actions, we are moving towards achieving our targets, which is great, but we need to continue to invest to actually do that, because it does cost a lot of money to when there's declining state investment in those areas, for us to actually look after those natural corridors that we love so dearly. So I'll end it there, and thanks to the officers for this very concise summary.
All right, thank you very much, Councillor McCarthy. Well, I propose to put that to the vote. All those in favour? And it's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Now, 8.3, online budget planning tool. Councillor Lee.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I submitted a set of alternate recommendations.
I'm happy to second it, Mr Mayor.
Seconded by Councillor Villela.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Villela. As the report states, this stemmed from a GB item that I put forward in February this year, where I proposed to have an interactive online budget planning tool to allow members of our community to submit their ideas and actually to, if you will, act in the shoes of our councillors and the directors to see what effect changes to certain areas of council budget and expenditure would have on others, and therefore the overall council budget. This idea is not new, of course, and as the reports indicate, a number of councils, both here in Australia but also overseas, use that, and it's a great way to engage with our residents to not only understand and appreciate the complexities of council financial planning that we're faced with on a year-to-year basis, but also, as you mentioned earlier, Mr Mayor, in the context of rate capping.
Yes.
In other words, if we are to seek a variation to our rate cap, what better voice than we have to have those from the residents telling us through this online tool that this is what the community wants and this is what the community expects and this is what the community expect to the council to deliver. So with that, when I read through the report, I was actually pleasantly surprised by the relative low cost of some of the planning tools. If you look at through page 19 and 20 of the report, you'll note that some of those tools can cost as little as $2,000 and upwards of $10,000. So with that figure in mind, I thought, well, we do have a mid-year budget review, and notwithstanding our $157 million revenue, notwithstanding our revised supplementary rates, the income to generate from that, there are always operational savings to be had, and I'll be very surprised if we can't find a little bit of operational savings to direct that into the 2016-17 budget, because the report as it reads suggests to me that we'll be considering the funding of that in the 16-17 budget with a view to implement it in 17-18. I think the report and the benefits of that suggest to me there's immediacy of an urgency of action on this, and I think if we can implement that in the 16-17 budget, it gives us not only the ability to plan with confidence, but also gives us a great amount of information which we can supply with the Essential Services Commission should we apply for a over and above the rate cap that will be imposed upon us next financial year. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, Councillor Sibler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I very much welcome the additional point, or the amendment rather, to the recommendation to bring forward deliberation around the extra $10,000 to our mid-year budget review. The reason being, Mr. Mayor, is because upon reading the report, it was very, and we've known this, that when we talk about community engagement, and in the previous agenda item, we've got the community engagement strategy, which is noted actually in the report. We want to, and indeed we must, as a community, as a council, work towards different opportunities and different ideas and that will increase community engagement, community participation, increase community awareness, all of that stuff. Now, when you look at the budget process, Mr. Mayor, which is a fairly critical process, there is, as the report states, really low community participation in the budget consultation, and it was good to be able to read in the report that we stated, but what we know, that there is very low community participation, and you know, we had, I think it says only one person attended a budget forum, you know, that is a concern to us. We need to increase. We need to address this low participation, community participation rate. So, what was pleasing in the report is that this particular tool, an online budgetary, what do we call it, planning tool, is one way of possibly increasing community participation. And then when the report showed the different models and how it works, I thought this is really interesting, because that way the community can look at the opportunity cost. If you know, we've got limited resources, and if you want to have something, you know, it's got to be offset by something else. And I think that process, and to know and for us as councillors to know, okay, well then this must be a priority if the community overwhelmingly is wanting to offset something else. So I think it's an important opportunity. It, you know, almost comes down to a right. If this tool is available out there in the community, and other councils across the world is using it, well then why aren't we using it? And then also, Mr. Mayor, because I think it's in our interest when the community is informed about the whole budgetary process and how complex it is, and it's great to get their input. Secondly,
but you might need to conclude because you're running out of time.
Yeah, I just think the urgency is even greater when the report says that with the rate capping, that it's been foreshadowed by, you know, the government, the Essential Services Commission, that we as a council must show evidence of an effective engagement process with the ratepayers.
Time has expired.
And we need to do that. So wholeheartedly approve. I think it's something we need to do.
Thank you very much.
Now, thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, I'll take Councillor Fontana.
Yeah, it's just briefly, I concur the speakers and also commend the initial proposal to consider this as an item, and also more importantly, Councillor Lee, insisting that we actually consider a very small amount to take us into the 21st century.
Yeah.
That's really, we've just looked at our annual report, and we want to have more people read it. By actually engaging people online, we'll have more input and have that necessary engagement which we need to demonstrate, not only to various authorities but also to our community, that we are listening, but also need to take into account the fact that it needs to link with the objectives of our council plan, our strategies, our direction, where it's going. And by doing that, we'll ensure that their input is considered within that scope to ensure that, you know, those outcomes are met. So I welcome this, and more importantly, commend the council already using it, and probably want to have a look at models which are coming in operation to see how we can incorporate that into our programming.
All right. Councillor McCarthy.
I just had a minor third point, and if the mover and seconder are happy to include it, it's pretty self-explanatory. It would be point 3, which would read, invite proposals from local schools, businesses and educational institutions to develop the a new online tool, in addition to considering the suppliers and products mentioned in the report.
Yep. Accepted.
And I'll explain if the seconder is happy to accept it, or I can explain.
Well, I took Councillor
So the first point would be to invite proposals from local schools, businesses and educational institutions to develop the online tool, in addition to considering the suppliers and products mentioned in the report.
That's not turning.
Is that okay with you? Because Councillor is accepted.
Well, that would be the process that we want to go anyway, wouldn't it be?
So, Councillor McCarthy?
So just to explain, and councillors might not be aware, but obviously we want to achieve this within the time frame as is outlined, to be able to use this as part of our budgeting process for next year. We don't want to slow that down. We don't tend to release our budget until around April from memory to the public for that submission process. So if that was the time frame council was working towards, there's around 4 to 6 months potentially. We do have a digital business incubator at the old Northcote Police Station, Art Deco, and I'm not sure if council is aware, but we actually have small businesses operating in that site there, which actually specialise in this sort of work. So whilst the online tools that are mentioned in this report are great, wouldn't it be terrific to see if there is an opportunity for one of our local businesses to do the work, given that they are doing this sort of work for councils and organisations all around the world. And
one thing I would point out, and we shouldn't preempt any procurement process, which is obvious, and so within the context of the Darebin Plus network and the matrices that council officers use, we wish them well.
That's right.
It's not guaranteed that it will.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And by no means are we committing ourselves to any suppliers, because there are also ones in other municipalities, and the Darebin Plus network is our preferred. But I just want to get past the presumption that we would necessarily use one of the products or suppliers that's listed in the report, when we would want to be applying our own local procurement approach in the first instance wherever we can.
But that's why we wish them well in that context.
That's right.
They may not get it. They may not.
They may not. That's right.
Now, I just want to put in one point before you do, Councillor Walsh. The whole notion here, and before I forget my train of thought, is it's probably timely for another consideration, not just for the particular emphasis that has been put by speakers to date, but we shouldn't forget that My Council is going online very shortly. So that, plus what we're doing, seems to be quite complementary in terms of receiving that kind of feedback, because I can assure you, just like with My Schools, that particular website has generated quite a bit of interest from the community. So with respect to My Council website, I'm sure it too will generate quite a bit of enthusiasm in terms of people who want to view how we're tracking, not just ourselves in terms of the benchmarks that it has, but relative to other councils, shapes, sizes and whatnot, if not just the general context in which we sit within the local government network. So a complementary tool like this, I think, works well, because that then we'll have two particular tools which will feed into the budget process as we go forward in time. So I just wanted to note that. Councillor Walsh.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I too will speak in favour of this, and but first of all, could I congratulate Councillor McCarthy on his amendment, because I do concur with it. But it is because this will be a good initiative and be a good way of helping the community get involved, which is what we want to, which is what we all want to see. I think, regardless of our differences that some of us may have on policy, I think we would all support the idea of greater community participation, and so that real community members are represented in a way that is easy for the average community member to get involved, which And the idea of supporting local businesses is certainly one which is worth pursuing. And Council already alluded to this may be the closest thing we get to the participatory budgeting, which is something that I did support at the time, and I still do support the principle. But in the era of the thought bubble, free ice creams on Sunday thought bubble, which is rate capping, Mr. Mayor, this may be the closest thing that we get.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Walsh. I think we're all pretty much on the same page on this one. I propose to put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much, councillors. Now, next one is 8.4, review of sale of minor council property.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move that, but I have an alternate motion.
Yep. Councillor Gregor.
Just second it, Mr. Mayor.
Yep. All right. Councillor Lorella seconds. Councillor Gregor.
Okay, Mr. Mayor. This is an alternate motion which basically puts forward a different option and a different approach to what's been suggested here in the report. Look, I think it's fair to say right at the outset that our sale of minor property assets policy has been controversial, to say the least, and that I think what's recognised is that we need to review the policy, and we need to get some sort of better understanding from stakeholders and from the community at large in regards to how we should actually move forward in relation to this policy, and why there needs to be a change in regards to this policy, given that we already had an existing policy and that now we've recently voted for a different policy. Mind you that when that vote did take place, there was particular circumstances surrounding this council. So, Mr. Mayor, just to go to the essence of what I'm proposing there. So the first point is, and I thank our governance officer, is that the council needs to resolve to do a full review on the policy, and then following on from that is that the methodology I think that we need to adopt, which would be much more comprehensive and also much more considered methodology than what's currently being proposed in this report, which is basically just a quick survey amongst a whole series of other questions that go out to the community, and where people sort of basically have to tick a box and quickly answer something without there being context. So what I propose in here...
Just if I can stop you there for a moment, Councillor Gregor, I have been advised that the timeframes associated with point 5 cannot be met, and we are past time, because it needs to go back out to the community for 28 days of consultation. Given where we are now in October, it may not be possible to actually bring it back before the end of this year. But to allow...
I'm happy to entertain a different time frame.
Just in terms of further elaboration, Mr. Dev, if we can ask Mr. Stevens.
Yeah, it could be change if it's all right as soon as possible. We will endeavour to do as early as possible.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if Councillor Rico would be amenable to saying at the first meeting at the conclusion of the hearing of submissions?
At the first meeting? Yep.
At the conclusion of the hearing of submissions.
Okay.
So we'll just see what that looks like. We'll receive a further report at the first meeting after the conclusion of the hearing of submissions. For Council's consideration. So after submissions, yep, for the councils or council's consideration. Yep. An apostrophe at councils. Oh, yep. That's better. So that gives us a bit of a...
Oh, look, I'm happy to that.
Over to you.
I hope the clock has been stopped.
Yeah, it was paused, so it's going to restart now.
Because I just want to make sure that we just go through some of the logic that's in this so much. Okay, just very quickly. So, one is to review. Second is that for the council to prepare a community discussion paper that sets out the pros and cons of the different approaches, and in relation to the old policy that we have, and also this new policy, and also that looks at the policies of other councils, so that we can get some context in relation to how we're looking at this particular issue. And then to invoke the hearing of submissions and committee process, because I think that that's one of the most fairest processes, where actually council is actually able to hear detailed submissions that provide the context in relation to what the community feels about this particular project, about this particular policy. The fourth point is that I think we should make an attempt to encourage residents, community groups, and developers, because I understand that developers are taking an interest in this particular policy, and also other interested parties to make submissions, so that we can get sort of a rounded picture of where the various players are coming from in regards to this particular policy. Then once we've done that and all those submissions have come in, the council has an opportunity to make a considered view about this particular policy. I think it's important because it's been a thorn in the side of council for some time, and I think that it really merits a comprehensive approach that enables us to really unpack the various positions and the various perspectives of this particular issue, and then at the end of that we can actually make an informed decision.
All right, thank you, Councillor Guerrero. Seconder, Councillor Guerrero.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I welcome Councillor Grego's alternate recommendation, because I was not. I think there's a real problem with our policy as it stands, and if we just accept the recommendation as per in the report, it doesn't address the obvious problems that we have with the policy as it stands, and therefore I think we need to go back to almost the drawing board, review the policy as it stands. Now, in the chamber, I'm on record as not supporting the policy as it stands, for the basic reason that, and that's why I welcome the review, for the basic reason, Mr. Mayor, that I think it's unfair, fundamentally unfair, and so therefore the recommendation to go out and survey the community, whether they support it or not, and whether it's good or bad, it's just too simplistic, because the matter is actually very complex. It's very complex, and I think it would not be presented in a way that highlights the complexities and what I think the fundamental inequity in our policy. And where does the inequity lie, Mr. Mayor? In that the way the policy currently stands is that we're out to sell it for market value. And so you've got, one neighbour, pinned against another, and there's that basically a little auction happening. The reality is, Mr. Mayor, as was noted earlier in our council meeting, that what's the percentage of 24% of our Darebin residents live below the poverty line. And there was another statistic that 41%, or for 41 out of every 100 residents have an income of less than $700. It's not a level playing field out there, Mr. Mayor. So to have residents bidding for a property that it doesn't quite sit comfortable with me in terms of our role as a council in trying to establish some kind of level playing field. I think our policy as it stands, Mr. Mayor, is skewed in favour of the moneyed, as opposed to those who may not be as financially well off, bidding for some land that and really at the end of the day, it's he or she with the most money will attend. I don't think that doesn't sit comfortable with myself, and the principle that should be underpinning the selling off of council land.
All right, time has expired, Councillor.
So I welcome the amendment, and I think it goes closer to addressing or making better something that's obviously not working and causing a lot of grief out there in the community. Plus also...
Councillor, your time has expired.
So I just want to thank you, Mr Mayor.
Mr Mayor, I think the alternative recommendation is in complete conflict with what's required, what's suggested here, so it actually can't be considered.
Mr Dev, just so we can get a clarification.
Yes, it's possible. Stevens, it's a notice of motion where you cannot do the conflict with.
So what would be outstanding if it would be passed? What would be outstanding if it would be if this would be to be passed, given it is in conflict?
Yes. Well, it appears that technically, if I'll just read the wording. The Councillor Fontana. It appears that Councillor Fontana has a point, because when we look at the local governance law under 30.3, an amendment must not be directly opposite to the motion. So, in its current form, it appears that in order to get to this, we would first need to put what's presented, voted down. I get the sense that everyone is in agreement with this, but just as a matter of process, then go to this one and have it put as an alternative.
If I can just make a point of clarification, I think the clause that you're referring there to...
sorry. I've just been advised. You're technically correct, but because it formed the view to be replaced, to replace what was in the book.
That's right.
This has become the substantive motion.
That's right.
Okay. So,
that's the point I wanted to make.
Thank you very much. Now we're on the same page. And thanks for the quick moving there. All right. I propose to put it. I think we're in agreement. All those in favour? Against? Okay. Councillor Walsh, your vote against is noted. So that leaves us now with 8.5, discontinuance of the right-of-way down Street. Councillor,
given the motion we just passed in relation to 8.4, would it be opportune or in fact prudent for us to defer 8.5 and 8.6, given the pending review of the policy in which we're operating?
I need to take some advice. You know, this is we had a discussion a few minutes back with the director. Some of these current there's no controversy, nothing, but some of the, particularly the 8.6, I know that depends on the planning permit going ahead. They're waiting for that. It's completely contained within their current boundary. Anyway, Mr. Secretary.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's correct from the CEO. So 8.5 relates to the planning development matter, and 8.6 is a separate matter.
So they're not related? Based on that advice from Mr. Hamilton.
8.5.
So,
Mr. Mayor, may I have a question? I mean, they may not be directly related, but I still think it falls under the same. Wouldn't it be under the same policy that's been reviewed? So, in order to have consistency, I think if it's the same policy, I think therefore it is related.
See, you need to look at each report on its own merit, because this policy is not just lane-based. Sometimes I know this number one, the 8.5, the project has to stop in that corner if we have not decided, isn't it, Mr.
Well, I've just been given some further advice that what was carried with respect to 8.4 would suggest that at the earliest it would come back to us by February of next year. So if we were to seek a deferral, apart from the interested party and those other interested parties, they'd be held more or less up in the air until next year.
Mr. Mayor, may I just propose, because the consequences of the review and how it impacts on these matters, would it be possible to just maybe defer to another council meeting, but have a briefing at a council briefing, just so that we become aware of the implications at the next council briefing, so that we can make a more informed
I take
decision.
you as a mover for a
Yes, I'm
referral.
happy to move that if others are...
Seconded, Councillor McCarthy.
Sorry, just to defer...
Until the next council meeting. Yes.
And 8 point, okay, we'll go one at a time.
8.5, 8.4 has already been passed,
Yes,
so 8.5
8.5.
we're seeking to defer until the next council meeting.
Yes.
And in which time, in between, we'll have a briefing as to how the review will impact on some of these decisions.
And just so we're clear, what that means in terms of our timelines, because the next statutory council meeting will be on the 9th of November, which is Monday. So at the earliest opportunity, and I'm not sure whether the 16th of November then is a briefing session. Yes, it is, just confirmed. So the earliest opportunity will be the 23rd of November, in which it will come back to council for its next ordinary council meeting.
So, Mr Mayor, on the basis that just to expedite things, so that can we apply this deferment both to 8.5 and 8.6?
No, unfortunately not, because we've just passed it. 8.4 was already passed.
No, I would say 8.5 and 8.6.
Mr Mayor, point of order, 8.6 is a completely different matter to 8.5. If people actually read the recommendation, it's fairly clear. And 5B, we're only transferring the land back to ourselves before we actually do anything with it. It's a statutory process we need to consider. So separate together to the previous one. That's nothing new from the old policy, new policy, and it'll be in the subsequent review we'll be doing.
Well, you're technically correct, but let me just point out a bit of advice that Mr Stevens just pointed out now. If you look within the context of the report, the circumstances in which that matter is being dealt is under the existing policy, not the prospective one. So that needs to be clarified. So that's with respect to 8.6. Now, if, for instance, councillors are of a mind, I'm just sort of putting it out there, that they wish to take time with both to actually consider those particular implications, then maybe I'll throw back to council, more than amenable to hearing a motion of deferral for items 8.5, 8.6, pending, like you said, a further briefing, and then to return back to council with a definite timeline for the 23rd of November. Yes, but if they want to have that clarified, I'm in their hands. So, is that the view of the council?
Just a point of clarification. 8.5, I in agreement in terms of deferring for 1 week while we get the update and the impact of that review. But 8.6 actually relies on our existing policy. That's the subject of review. So I don't see 8.6 being brought back on the 23rd of November. I see that as brought back after the review and the process and the motion that we just adopted under 8.4.
So then the deferral then is confined to 8. Yeah, so it's just confined to 8.5. Well, if that's the way we want.
Let's do it one at a time.
Yeah, we'll put that to the vote then for the deferral of 8.5. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you.
Before you move to 8.6, Mr Mayor, I just would note, I've just had a message, amazing how residents are all tech savvy these days. We've got a resident at the door downstairs, the doors are locked at the council. So if I could ask that, there we go. So I just I know we've had an issue with committees lately, but it's now happening at council meetings. So
the community engagement strategy at work.
That's engagement.
Now that that's been clarified, which is good, we can move to 8.6. Mover, please.
Move 8.6, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Fontana moves. Seconder?
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Williams. Councillor Fontana.
Oh, look, it's nothing different to previous items we've actually taken in possession of our recommendations in previous right-of-ways. We actually need to take possession and maintain control of the asset, which is on 5.B. Council therefore intends to transfer the title to itself. So we actually have to manage that. It's completely different to the previous one. This has been in the previous policy, the one we adopted several months ago, and it's actually not going to change. We're simply making sure that we maintain the ownership and control of the asset before anything can be done. So it actually can't impact on anything. And I think it might be important to actually note that there's certain items which need to be considered in relation to timelines and timeframes. So to defer this and delay this will probably have implications down the track with subsequent, I suppose, developments and proposals.
All right, thank you, Councillor Fontana. Councillor Williams is the seconder.
Just my fellow councillor. has said, it's just a statutory process, and we just follow through the statutory process on it.
All right. Councillor Lee.
Yes, I'll speak against it. In fact, I'm surprised I have to speak against it because we just passed 8.4, which we resolved by a very wide margin to review the policy, and yet 8.6 operates on the very basis of the policy in which we're reviewing. So I do find that somewhat erroneous because, as I said earlier, if other councillors want to speak, they all have the opportunities. Now is my opportunity to speak, so I wish other fellow councillors can pay me the due respect that I paid them when they were speaking. Notwithstanding, if you read 8.6, it invokes the very policy that we're reviewing. Why are we proceeding down the sale of an asset?
It's not a sale.
If I keep getting injected, I expect the chair to take some control of the meeting.
Councillor Lee, my apologies, I wasn't paying attention, was receiving some advice.
That's okay, I'm just getting interjected.
Yep. Well, please proceed.
Thank you. As I said earlier, this 8.6 invokes the very policy which we just agreed not only 5 minutes ago to undertake a comprehensive review on the suggestion of Councillor Greco and Councillor Villela. So I do find it somewhat strange to having to resolve to put this proceeding forward on the basis of the policy that we're yet to review. As I said in the chamber before, what this policy that we're yet to review says to do is pit residents against residents, pit residents against cash-up developers, and essentially, if I want to put it bluntly, is a grab for yet untitled land, so we can then sell it off to the highest bidder. That's what the policy does. And we've recognised the shortfall of the policy. That's why we resolved to review the policy, invite community submissions, and go through the full hearing of the submission process. So I cannot, in my good conscience, to let this recommendation pass as it conflicts directly with 8.4 resolution which we just passed. So on that basis, I'll be voting against it.
All right. Now, before I receive other speakers, through you, Mr. Dev, I have some advice that Ms. Stevens wants to provide to the council.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just to clarify for all councillors, 8.6 relates to the 1997 policy, not the one that's we adopted that you've asked to be reviewed.
So, yes, Mr. Dev.
You see, the councillors deferring a matter to a later decision is a good idea. No matter what it is, you can do that. But you cannot be in a policy vacuum because this covers significant procedural matters. Sometimes it will depend on it. So our plan is to bring till it's being reviewed to the briefing individual applications, and you will see the variety of them. So we've got to go on, otherwise somebody can take it a weekend saying that we are not making decision, and so we will cover that. So you can defer that, but we will bring whatever is exceptional to you for you to consider through the briefing to the council meeting.
All right, thank you, Mr. Dev. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I can see the point that Councillor Lee is seeking to make, which is not so much, I think, and this is critical to note, that this has been considered under the new policy, but rather what I think the new policy is about, which I don't think the old policy was about. What we're actually considering here is about council declaring a piece of land which council does not currently claim title on as council-owned land. That's what's up for contention here. And the question before council tonight is, do we wish to rush in as per this process and say that piece of land, that land there, the owners, the adjoining property owners haven't been able to come to an agreement, it's stated in the report, and therefore we're going to take title and engage in a process where we might then discontinue the land and sell the land to a property owner. In effect, undertaking the sort of process that Councillor Lee described, which effectively puts and pits adjoining property owners against each other, but also potentially residents against much wealthier developers, and we know who loses out in those situations. I think the real question before councillors here tonight is, do we want to be stepping into a situation when we have evidence, both in the report and in correspondence from the Hearing of Submissions Committee, that there is an adverse possession claim that has been made in relation to this land? Will we respect that process, which I believe the 1997 policy allowed for, as most councils around Victoria allow for, and equivalent councils in the metropolitan region that are dealing with these issues all the time allows for, which is to see the adverse possession process not as a blight on council's own land ownership, but rather a reasonable way to consider the approach, but also to look at ways to minimise the costs to all parties in that adverse possession approach, which is what the 1997 policy and the policies of other councils such as Glen Ira and elsewhere have done. Councillors would be aware there are different ways of dealing with this situation, and we need to be very, very clear about the consequences of what we're proposing to do here tonight, which is effectively taking a piece of land and saying that is now council property, and we will then undertake what we wish to do with it as per our policy settings, whether it's the old or the new policy. So I'll just make the point that the issue for us tonight is not about who we're selling it to. The issue is about whether we are going to step in and claim title, and I certainly can't support that based on the information that has been provided, and I think this deserves a much closer look before we go down that path.
Right, just to restate
just the point. I just need to withdraw something that I just said. I think it's important now that the issue has been highlighted. I do want to withdraw my reference to the 2015 policy, which I spoke out, which I would now wish to withdraw. I do recognise the 1997 policy, but everything else I said stands.
No worries. And I was just about to... Wait, Councillor Walsh, please. I just need to restate that as well in the context of Councillor speaking. And if there's any confusion, just to draw their attention to page 34, and that is that this particular item is being dealt with under the 1997 policy for good or for bad. But that's the state of play. Prospectively, as with what was demonstrated preceding this in terms of the deferral, will be items to be considered, or the policy objectives to be considered under the 215 consideration. So councillors should be careful not to embellish the two because they are distinct propositions. Yep, Councillor Walsh.
I was going to, if it's possible, Mr. Mayor, to suggest a deferral of this to perhaps the first meeting in December, or to next council meeting. Ask Louis to move us.
Can I just? We need to deal with the substantive motion.
Yes.
If this fails, then we can consider a deferral.
Okay. So look, I'm going to put it to the vote because I think
I'd like to speak.
Well, I know, but because Councillor Walsh is looking at a potential deferment motion, and we do have plenty of items on the agenda, we'll get this one done and see if we can move forward. So I propose to put the substantive motion for the vote. All those in favour? Against? I declare it lost. Now, Councillor Walsh.
Thank you very much. I move that we defer this item.
Second that.
To a date.
I'm happy to second it, Mr. Mayor, but may I just suggest that to defer it to do what? What action? Warrants the deferral.
Thanks, Councillor Boella. I was happy to I was happy to be guided by our officers in terms of an appropriate date for deferral.
Yeah, I don't think the dates are at issue, Councillor.
Can I suggest, Mr. Mayor, that you might want to consider, Councillor Walsh, that we defer it, but it needs to come to a councillor briefing to have a robust discussion as to what the implications are, so that we can all make an informed decision, and we'll take it from there.
I'm happy to accept that.
All right. So what we'll do, if we can just, if I can ask you, Councillor, just to note the rationale and hand it to the minute takers. So at least that way, when it comes to recording of the minutes, there's an understanding for remote posterity, for the very least, as to why we're deferring it.
Yes.
So I propose to put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried. So that item has been deferred, and it will be the responsibility of the new mayor to take on. All right. So that concludes councillors' items for consideration under 8. We have no motions. I'll tell you what, in the context of the review of our governance processes, a cap on the amount that individual councillors is certainly one that I'll be pushing for. Before we continue and give the call, and following our custom and practice, given that Councillor Lawrence is not here, can I please have a deferral motion for 8.4, which is listed in 9.4 rather, which is listed in his name. Happy to move the deferral.
I'll be happy to move Councillor Lois's motion, because I have a slight amendment to it. So
I think
I think under the rules I can move.
I think because I know the rules, Councillor Greco, but it's more out of procedural fairness. More out of just respect for the fact that it was in the name of the councillor, and there's no rush on this, so we can have that considered.
The only reason I said that, Mr. Mayor, because it's been in our agenda twice.
I know, but just to put it in context, I know, and I appreciate that, but just to put it in context, when you were away, you had items listed in your name, in which Councillor Lawrence ironically moved for the deferral because you weren't here. So I'm just sort of following up on that practice.
No problem.
So I'll put that deferral to the vote.
I don't think Councillor Fontana had a second, so I'll second that.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Lee. I'll propose to put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Now, Councillor Walsh, I'm going to ask you kindly if you can step into the seat and run 9 with Councillor McCarthy.
Okay, so 9.1, in the name of Councillor McCarthy, activation of the former Fairfield Police Station.
If I've got a seconder, I'll speak to it.
Second.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Fontana, as well. I'll keep this brief. This and the two subsequent items, in fact, have carried over from the 21st of September. So I'll just make the point, this has been sitting on our books for a little while too. Councillor Fontana and Councillor Greco will recall in 2008, Council was given the option of potentially purchasing the site there, the Fairfield Police Station site in Wingrove Street, directly opposite Fairfield Primary School. I happened to be down at Fairfield Primary School for their art expo recently, which I know yourself, Councillor Walsh, and the Mayor also attended. And what struck me, and I'm down in Fairfield quite a lot, but what struck me was the fact that everyone was talking about the site across the road and the terrible state that it's currently in. It is fenced up, it is overgrown with weeds and other bits and pieces, and yet it's only been, I think now 5 or in fact 6 years ago, when there were a range of proposals being touted for what should happen there. Everything from social housing projects through to an early years centre through to open space. And there was a petition of 1,000 residents back in 2008 to convert that site into an open space piece for the Fairfield Primary School, but the local community, given the lack of open space in that particular neighbourhood. So this is simply to try to get council to do some advocacy in this regard, to invite some community suggestions, to generate a bit of a conversation with our community who know this site well. We saw the demolition of the old Scout Hall there, which of course the Scouts had to find a new location. This site is sitting vacant. As far as I understand from my research, it's still in state government hands. We have a new state government and hopefully an interest in doing something with this site which is a bit more creative. That might be anything from a pop-up park to a housing project, whatever it might be, but it's certainly in a parlous state at the moment, and I think our community, and particularly Fairfield Primary School and Fairfield Traders, deserve a better outcome on that site. So I'm putting that forward, and I ask the councillors to support getting the conversation going with our community.
Councillor Fontana.
Yeah, I do commend the notice of motion from Councillor McCarthy. There is a shortfall of open space area, but I do recall a while ago that there might be some possible contamination on the site, so I think we may need to consider that, and we have to write to the relevant authorities to see what options can be considered in light of what could be there.
Are there any, do I have any further speakers? If not, I'll just add a couple of comments. This is a good notice of motion by Councillor McCarthy, and you know, it's advocacy. So so in many ways, the final result may be out of our hands, but it is certainly important to advocate for this area, and I'm speaking from the perspective of a fellow ward councillor. So I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. 9.2, in the name of Councillor McCarthy again, identification of land to expand Council's Green Open Space Network.
Happy to second.
Moved Councillor McCarthy, seconded Councillor Lee. Could I call Councillor McCarthy?
Thank you, Acting Chair. I'll keep it brief once again. We have a very strong open space policy. We articulate a view towards a no net loss, and this is proposing that we look at a policy principle of a net increase in the green open space, which is a position that's now being advocated the City of Melbourne, Stonington Council and a range of other inner urban councils. And this provides us with leverage when we are engaging with developers around what they provide on site, about them in fact providing some green open space for the public on their sites. And I draw Council's attention to areas like Preston Junction, where we have a lot of large buildings going up at the moment and not a lot of place for locals to recreate. We don't have a policy setting to in fact give us the strong advocacy in those discussions with those applicants around them providing green open space to the community as part of their proposal. So this certainly puts us on the front foot there. But importantly, there's also land which is owned and in the ownership at the moment of the state government and various authorities. We've got a couple of primary schools and other educational sites that are literally sitting vacant, waiting for something to happen. And there's a great opportunity there for us to map those pieces of land, to understand where they are, and to start the next level of advocacy that we need to do with our new government in Victoria about potentially making that space available to the citizens of Darebin via their council. So it's a pretty simple proposal, but it's about getting some movement underway in regard to expanding our green open space network. And we know with more people living in apartments, and it was only recently in the last quarter that the number of apartments approved in the City of Darebin in fact was higher than the number of single dwellings. We now see that growth in medium density dwellings is actually the major trend line. So we need to be sure that we are providing the green open space for our residents now and into the future. I'll end it there, Mr Mayor, and hopefully Council will support it.
Thank you very much, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Lee.
Yes, thank you, Mr Acting Chair. Just a slight addition to the Councillor McCarthy's motion under 2. So the land that could be gifted to or purchased. So I just want to add the word access. Access, gifted to or purchased.
Happy to accept.
That's acceptable to move it, Councillor McCarthy.
Yes, I believe that has been. Yes, thank you. As Councillor McCarthy said, there are a lot of land that's currently being locked up, and a couple of examples pop into mind is one is the East Preston Primary School, which has quite a large open space, but is somewhat officially locked up by the Department of Education. Just across the road here, the Preston Girls Secondary College, educational land that's effectively locked up and prevented access to our community groups. So, we understand there are commercial considerations to be given on large parcels of land, but if we can at least gain access to some of that land, I think it aligns with a lot of our previous advocacy efforts and work, and I think that is in the spirit of that motion that's been proposed by Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lee. Do I have any further speakers? If not, I'll propose to put that to a vote. All in favour? And being no against, I'll declare that carried. Endorsement of the People's Climate March in November, also by Councillor McCarthy. Councillor, also from the 21st of September.
And I'll second it just for...
Now, I'm in the rather strange position of being in the chair and just wanting to ask Councillor McCarthy, what does what would agreeing to become a partner mean for Council? Will you explain?
Happy to explain that in my statements if I can speak to the... I'm happy to address that in my opening remarks.
I'm happy to give you the floor then.
Thank you, Chair. So councillors may be aware that in the past Council has taken a very strong advocacy position in relation to climate action, both at the local, state, national and international level. We've also been party to a range of community gatherings both here and in Melbourne, and the view has been that we need to show a very strong visible presence to other levels of government we believe in strong action. That's what our community's called for. Our community satisfaction surveys certainly reveal that strong concern for our practical action on climate, but also the major policy changes that need to take place at other levels. The People's Climate March is a terrific activity. It's a community-based activity, very family-friendly. It was run last year with support from GetUp and other organisations, and very much was about bringing the community together, mobilising them, getting those conversations about things like solar savers, which we've done here in the city of Darebin, plus improved climate policy. And this, of course, precedes the Paris negotiations on climate change. This is simply to endorse, as one of a number of councils that are endorsing the march and saying this aligns with our advocacy work. And of course, it would mean that we would be listed as one of the councils that endorses this march alongside other councils in Victoria as well, of which a number are already underway in that process. And of course, it would also mean that when it comes to having a presence on the day, just like other activities that we've done, the council would encourage residents to attend via its website and communication. So it's really about supporting our community to have their say on this really important issue, but of course also continuing council's advocacy when it comes to action on climate. We do it locally with solar savers, and we also do it in terms of our advocacy to other levels of government, and certainly in that spirit as well. So I'll end it there, and welcome back to the Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Oy.
I don't have anything to add in the interest time.
Okay then. Do I have any further speakers? If not, I'll propose let's vote. All those in favour? And that's carried. I'll now throw back to the Mayor.
Want to take this? Thank you to the Deputy. Right. Next item.
It's your motion.
Yep. So
point 5, which is also in your name, Councillor McCarthy. Rescission for Amendment 136.
Before we do, I just need to declare an interest in the item, Mr Mayor. It's a residential amenity issue that I live within 150 metres of St George's Road.
Okay. Seconder, please.
I'm happy to second.
Councillor Lee seconds. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and look, I'll keep it brief. There's been a lot of correspondence in relation to this one. As I'm sure Council is aware, I think I counted certainly over 50 emails today, and a number yesterday as well. And there's a lot of interest in our position in relation to this. I'm proposing to take us back to where we were on the 7th of September, which I believe was the right decision for Council to make in relation to capping heights along St George's Road on most sites at 3 or 4 stories, and one significant site being 6 stories on the corner of Oakover Road. And of course ensuring the imposition of a 30-degree setback rule along most of those sites, not just those that are zoned residential, which is what the revised proposal at the last meeting did. Because the 30-degree setback rule is in fact one of the primary propositions we took out to our community, which was very well received, where people said, I'm prepared to support some medium density along St George's Road, but what I want to know is it going to be a sheer wall like they've got in High Street, Northcote, and High Street, Thornbury now, or is it going to be a gentle setback that actually doesn't block out all the light from my backyard or my neighbour's backyard? And we're seeing evidence of those planning failures, not only on High Street, in fact, at the moment, but also on St George's Road at a couple of sites where neighbouring properties are massively overshadowed for the first half of the day. I believe that the Council, and it was at a meeting that I was not present, so I'm not sure of the full extent of the debate, but I believe that Council should have given consideration to the revised version of C136 as proposed by Councillor Lawrence for a number of grounds. Apart from the substantive grounds, which is I thought the 7th September decision was a superior one and more consistent with our community's views and attitudes, and struck the right balance between the submissions and of course the aspiration of both the state government and sometimes the council to find how we can increase density in the city of Darebin in an appropriate way. But I think on process grounds, council in so many respects had taken a position on the 7th of September, which was widely promoted. It was given great coverage in the local paper. It was, of course, also addressed in the Darebin Community News. I myself had a column about it that's already circulated in the public. And, of course, it was part of Council's representation to a VCAT hearing in relation to a matter in midway up St George's Road in Thornbury there. So I'm firmly of the view, and certainly my reading of our governance law is that if we take action on a matter, then we shouldn't be rescinding it. But further to that, in this case, I believe very strongly that decisions have been made in response to our 7th September decision, and they have had a direct and immediate impact, just like a statutory planning application would as well. So on both process grounds and on substance grounds, I believe that we should return to where we were on the 7th of September. It is what I believe the community very strongly has told us, and in many ways I think it's a decision that reflects the values of our community, which says yes to low to medium density housing along the St George's Road corridor, but no to the major high rises that are out of place and not in keeping with that vision that was put in place decades ago, before all of our time, of St George's Road being a residential avenue and not a high-rise corridor. And it is St George's Road, it's not St Kilda Road, and we need to be very, very clear about where we are and where we are putting density of that scale, where we have now in the junction those sorts of developments taking place, and not along this corridor. So I'll end it there. I think the arguments are clear on substance grounds and on process grounds. We got it right on the 7th of September, and I'm hoping we can correct the decision by putting us back in that position of the 7th of September by rescinding the last meeting's motion this evening.
All right, thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Lee is the seconder.
Yes, thank you. Feels like a bit of a time warp, really, because when I left this council meeting in the 7th of September, I thought we had this matter resolved, but evidently not. Be that as it may, I think the toing and froing of the various rescindment motions needs to be talked about. I'm supporting the rescindment, if I can call it that, of Councillor McCarthy for 3 reasons, possibly more. Well, first of all, there's a lack of overall legislative framework by which we can pin social and affordable housing, that's as suggested by the previous rescindment motion. In other words, what we're wishing for is the goodwill. We rely on the goodwill of developers, we rely on the goodwill of the market, and we all know that market can fail, and I'll speak to that in a minute. Secondly, it does not echo the concerns and wishes of our community. As Councillor McCarthy said earlier, when we spoke with the community, people understand that there needs to be development along the St George Road corridor. People understand that there needs to be development on Plenty Road corridor, and they're also sensitive of the need for the transition between high-intensity development and residential streets in which they live. That's why they agreed to 30-degree setbacks. That's why they agreed to moderate changes to the area, to the extent that not only allow for good residential amenity for the residential streets, but also for the internal residential amenity, which I've mentioned numerous times in our planning committee meetings, to the residents which are about to move into those yet-to-be-built high-rise apartments. I do want to speak to the issue of appeasing developers, and I think it relies on a very flawed logic, and that is the trickle-down effect. We all understand what the trickle-down effect is. In other words, if we give the powerful and the rich and those who can afford some form of inducement, that they will somehow provide some social crumbs for those who may not be able to afford it. This is our equivalent, our housing equivalent of the trickle-down effect. In other words, if we appease the developers by giving them 6 stories or even 10 stories, somehow they might give 1 or 2 apartments that are somewhat socially or financially affordable. Well, clearly that hasn't worked in the marketplace in the world. I'm happy to be corrected, but last time I checked, the rich just got a lot richer. So it goes back to the substantial nature of why we're developing a planning scheme amendment. It is my belief that you can have high quality, low intensity and low impact social housing. They are being done. They're already here. Have a look along Girl Street. Have a look along High Street in the Junction area. We do have 4-story social housing out there.
You may wish to summarise, Councillor.
I will summarise very quickly. What we are seeking to do in the previous rescindment motion was going back to the 80s model, 1980s model of social and affordable housing, build high rises. And we all know that's a failed model. So I cannot support that because times have moved on, and it's time this council move on and give a surety to our community
Time
out
has
there
expired.
about the planning scheme amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I rise to speak in favour. Mr. Mayor, this is, I think generally this, the motion on the, which was passed on the 7th, was generally a, was generally sound, and it gives residents resident certainty, which is obviously should be the aim of all planning schemes. I don't think it was perfect, but nothing. But it's hard to get perfect in this world. So I think we should support it, and we shouldn't have allowed it to be. I don't think we should have allowed it to be rescinded because because there are examples of how it had already been acted upon, but that was the decision that was made, and I'll support that decision. But but it should go. But the thing is, some councillors have said, the problem is this will just get thrown. The minister will just throw this back in our faces. Well, if that's the case, we should put it through. We should stand by it as a council, and we should be telling and our local residents to lobby the planning minister and lobby the local state MPs, the state government MPs, particularly the members for Northcote, to stop standing in the way and start supporting and start doing her job, which is supporting local residents. So that is what we should do. We should just stand by our decision on the 7th and get on with it. There are parts of St George's Road which Greater Heights are probably needed. For example, the Oakhover precinct.
You may wish to summarise your comments, Councillor Walsh.
And I'm glad that we are supporting Greater Heights. But I will finish by saying our job is to protect our residents from the modern scourge of ugliness.
All right. Councillor Gregor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I rise to support the rescission motion, and I'm glad that Councillor McCarthy has brought it back to the council, because I think the decision that we made on the 7th of September, which overwhelming majority of the council, I think there were only 2 dissenters, that supported reasonable heights along the St George's Road corridor, and I think that was a sound decision, and that council made. I've heard the arguments of Councillor McCarthy in relation to the previous rescission motion by Councillor Lawrence. I think that was very capricious in a sense, because there was no process grounds, as Councillor McCarthy said. There was no process grounds about to call for that rescission. So, with the absence of process grounds, the only thing that one is left to think is that it's basically there to deliver higher heights for developers, and I can't accept that, Mr. Mayor. I think the decision that we made on the 7th of September met community expectations. It's very hard to meet community expectations in relation to planning issues, because we've got a very fine balance to meet, and I think that we struck that balance in a very creative way, and I think we made a courageous decision on the 7th of September, and then also I think that the decision that we made, let's look at the decision, because often words like blanket cover and things like that, it's not a blanket cover. What we're looking at is 3- and 4-storey developments in some places 8 stories, and in some places greater than 4 stories along the St George's Road corridor. So I think it's a very reasonable approach, and I think, again, it's striking that right balance. And what we've been able to do, and we haven't really taken this into account, people have been able to move from their original position of saying no development along St George's Road to accepting a 3 or to a 4-storey level development along St George's Road. And I find that quite welcoming from the community, where some of the community members, their stance was a blanket no, but instead now they're accepting as 3 and 4 as a reasonable and respectable approach by the council in relation to that particular corridor. So I commend Councillor McCarthy for rescinding the rescission motion. So let's just get back to basics. Let's go back to the 7th of September. Let's put our best foot forward in relation to the Minister, as Councillor Walsh has said. And this is what the council wants. This is what the community wants. Let's now await what the Minister is prepared to give the residents of Darebin.
All right. Thank you very much, Councillor Greco. Before putting it to the vote,
I want to speak against the rescission motion, Mr Mayor, for what it's worth, please, if I may.
Councillor Montana.
Thank you very much. Look, I think we need to be practical about this, and what this rescission motion actually seeks to do is ignore our housing strategy and also our land use policies, which we've adopted. And these policies and these strategies actually embedded in our MSS, which suggests that St George's Road, being a transport corridor, can actually accommodate a variety of different height levels with design development overlays, which restrict certain or impose certain conditions where there's minimal negative interface with neighbouring residential amenity. And that's reality. What this rescission motion actually seeks to do is actually water down what we've agreed to on the previous motion, and also August 17th motion, which we've had our officers work with our residents, and numerous briefings we've had in relation to precincts and certain sections of precincts where we can accommodate a variety of different heights. Heights which are not over the top, heights which are fairly practical. And we also need to understand, councillors, we can't impose a 3 or 4 height restriction. We already have 5s and 6s approved, under construction. Some are built already along that corridor with design development overlays. With the 30 degree, which Councillor McCarthy spoke about, and we've all supported a 30 degree line of sight. But we also had a 7-storey application approved, which is now elapsed, thankfully. But reality is, we also have in the Preston Structure Master Plan 10 stories approved already, which I'm sure the Minister, once he looks at, will consider higher yield. He's already looked at the Moreland proposal and tore it to shreds and incorporated 10, 12, 13 stories along Bell Street. We don't want that. They were a little bit, probably underprepared in how they lodged theirs. We have actually done a lot more work through absorbing and taking on board the panel recommendations to consider what's practical, what's sensible, and importantly, not ignoring our land use strategies and our housing strategies, which we've all contributed to over a series of 2 terms. That's very, very important. Now, these design development overlays, which we will lose if this rescission actually gets up, will more than likely, could lose, I should not, will, could, with the Minister taking full control of this and probably saying, this is all no good. He will then take control and incorporate, Councillor Walsh. He will then take control, more than likely, and then impose his own restrictions, taking the control out of our hands. Well, why are we here then? Why are we here? Sure, I don't like the decision of having certain heights. We've decided that with the panel recommendations. And if you look at page 15 of our annual report, we're expecting next 20 years another 40,000 residents to live in Darebin. Where are we going to put them? I want to protect our neighbourhood streets, our pockets of residential amenity, Summer Estate, the West Preston, Mary Creek Estate. No, some people went 40 seconds over. I like that consideration too. And also our estate too. We will be a laughing stock if this gets up and the Minister then takes control.
All right. Look, thank you very much. Councillor Lowe.
Just very quickly, Mr Mayor, I feel compelled to speak on this matter because I was quite vocal in the chamber regarding the original rescission motion. So I think for me, of course, I supported the was it September 7th? Yep. 3-4 combination for reasons that have already been discussed in the chamber. But on principle, Mr. Mayor, I'm supporting this particular rescission motion because I have grave concerns regarding the legitimacy or the motivation behind the first rescission motion that came to council. I made it quite clear in the chamber. A decision was made, a vote was taken, and the outcome was that the 3-4 heights limitation won out. Now, then I dare to say at the following council meeting there was, it was political opportunism, if you ask me, and I had to be cynical about it. 2 councillors weren't here, so it was put back on the table. I had a real problem with that, and I think the community saw through that. Decisions are made where this is the body where it's made. Some people, there's winners and losers. And sometimes we have to accept decisions that get upheld that we may not support, but that's the system that we have. And I was very cynical about the motivations as to why it came back to council in the rescission motion, so I welcome Councillor McCarthy's rescission motion because I feel it's a correction of something that was not quite right in the chamber, and upholding, we'll see what happens, but a decision that was made in council, a legitimate decision for legitimate reasons, and how the minister decides to respond to it is the minister's business. In terms of the population growth, Darebin's quite large and we shouldn't have to concentrate. The responsibility to house the growth, the predicted growth should not lie in, Gilbert Road and a number of streets. So we've had that discussion, but I welcome the rescission motion. It's a correction.
All right,
thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Walsh,
Mr. Mayor,
you've already spoken with Councillor Walsh.
No, I'm not speaking. I'm just noting an interest which I couldn't note before because I was out of the chamber.
Okay. So, Councillor McCarthy, can you please close this?
Thank you. How long have we got, Mr. Mayor?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Thank you. I'll keep it to 2 then. I just want to respond to some of the things that were raised by Councillor Fontana. I think it's important to put these on the record. Firstly, our decision of 7th September is not in breach of our housing policy. Our housing policy talks about the type of housing and the housing targets we want to deliver. St George's Road was never intended, by virtue of the first motion moved on this in 2012, which called for interim height controls of 3 stories and the beginning of a structure plan. And I say that because I moved the motion and Councillor Lawrence seconded it at the time. Our intent in this process was never to move St George's Road to high density, but rather to look at what is the appropriate medium density. Our housing strategy does not go so far as to say that it all has to be on St George's Road. The motion moved at the previous meeting is built on a legal fallacy. There is no provision in Victorian legislation that the Planning Minister can use at the moment to enforce the inclusion of affordable housing as described in Councillor Lawrence's motion. It is impossible to do. If we are thinking that we move something in this chamber and the Planning Minister suddenly creates new legislation to accommodate us, we are so far away from reality it's not funny. It would be lovely if he did, because we've written submissions advocating inclusionary zoning, but he has not responded, nor did his predecessor, and nor did Mr Madden before him. So we are on policy grounds, and yet we have no. I would also make one point as well. The figure of 40,000 extra residents in the city of Darebin needing to be housed has been touted around. The reason why we have that figure, it increased from 30,000 to 40,000, is because it is based largely on our rate of approvals of apartments. The more we approve, the more they adjust the figures up. All right? It is not based on anything more sophisticated than that, and that is a fact. And if you look at what happened, we approved more apartments than we did single dwellings, and our population figures went up in 6 months by 10,000.
Time has expired, Councillor McCarthy.
So we need to start talking about the truth, about what's really going on here.
Okay. Before I put it to the vote, I'll just put my own 2 cents worth. Councillors and the community should be aware that Amendment C-152, with all its nobility, was rejected outright, and without any narrative, as to why. There was some pretty good stuff in there, which I think most councillors would note, that a half-baked version was approved for the City of Moreland, Ours was a lot more sophisticated in terms of its carriage of the community consultation.
Mayor, could you just briefly explain C150? I think it's important the gallery and those of you who understand what we've just lost.
The breadth of C152 encapsulates the ability for the council to incorporate within its matrix of consideration as to what it considers to be a supportable development, the inclusion of environmental sustainability considerations to become primary tools in our planning process. It goes under the acronym of ESTAP. Now, sadly, that was rejected. We got a very good briefing on that from one of our officers at the DUG meeting that unfortunately both yourselves, Councillor McCarthy and Lee, were absent. I chaired in your absence. So we got a very good presentation as to kind of the good stuff that was involved there, and sadly prior to the communication from the Minister, a very upbeat assessment as to its prospects of success. That being the case, I took it as a harbinger that 136 and 137, regardless of what we do tonight, will be rejected. So the problem for us now is, yes, we can maintain our fixed position, the government fixes theirs. It's almost like counterintuitive, but that which we wish to forestall sends a green light out to the community, and all those who wish to rush in and put in their applications from now, whilst we dither, and whilst we get parried and harried in relation to a position that pushes us out to the middle, if not late next year, the current set of arrangements stay in place. And that's a fact.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. Just for the completeness of your summary, perhaps it'd be worthwhile mentioning to the chamber and the gallery that C138, the municipal strategic statement, was actually approved by the minister, which actually articulates the overall vision for this city, which all the other subsequent amendments actually sit under. So, in other words, the minister actually agrees with our strategic vision of the city. There may be some disagreement further down the track, but I think it's important to actually, for the chamber and the gallery to actually note that C138 was actually approved by the minister.
And that being the case, it lends itself to the old adage that the devil is in the detail.
It was C152 was actually our planning zones, and not our environmental policy.
Yep, but it's on that schedule.
It's important to note that all the minister has done is back Matthew Guy's position on this. We have no answers on this.
Whatever else happened, Councillor McCarthy,
so I'd ask you,
we lost it.
So we go
back to the drawing board.
We shouldn't follow.
We go back to the drawing board. Councillor McCarthy, that's the end result. So I'll put it to the vote and see where we go. All those in favour? Against? And the note that is carried.
Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Well, actually, those in favour of it.
Those in favour first.
I name Councillor Walsh, Councillor Greco, Councillor Below, Councillor Lee, Councillor McCarthy, and those against, I name myself and Councillor Fontana. Okay, now 9.6 without further ado.
I'm sorry, I'll have to exit the chamber because I have a direct interest.
All right, thank you. We'll just wait, Councillor Greco, for Councillor Below to exit. I am going to ask a polite question, and also courtesy of the fact that it's my last meeting. Are any of these items controversial, Councillor Greco, that we might, package them all up and move them on block?
Well, if people are willing to move all these motions, I'm quite happy for people to give them a big tick. I'm very happy about that. No. If you don't want to hear my voice, and if that's any consolation, you don't want to hear my voice.
It's 9:30, and we will need to move for an extension of time at the top of the hour. And the issue is we also have 6 GBs as well to plough through. So
happy to second this.
Go for it, and let's see if we can try and move quickly.
Yeah, moving quickly. Look, the motion is very self-explanatory. Look, my motivation in putting this, because I was encouraged by an article that appeared in the Leader last week, where the owners of the market basically said that they want to retain the market as an ongoing activity on the site, and to improve and replace the various parts of the market, and because they feel that it could continue to be a valuable asset for the community. Now, that's a very positive statement that we're getting from the owners of the market, but given that the market is very vulnerable to possible choking development, and given that there are over 130 stores, there's lots of jobs there. We need to provide some certainty in relation to the livelihoods there. I think it's appropriate that, given that there has been some commitment, which is just a verbal commitment by the owners, let's enter into Section 173 agreement with the owner. Let's propose that to the owner, to enter into a binding contract with the owner about retaining the market. That's a way of testing. That is a way of testing the goodwill of this major developer. If this major developer has put into the local papers and by the local papers to the whole of the Darabin community that they want to retain the market, take the next step and let's see if we can get into a Section 173 agreement with the owners. Now, councillors, a 173 agreement is basically a contract which is between the council and the owners of the land, which look at the in relation to restrictions and in relation to the use and development of the land. And I think that it's the most appropriate tool that we can put here. Let us put that forward. We're going to have discussions. That's according to the motion that was passed last week. They're going to be continuing discussions with the owners. As part of those discussions, I'm suggesting, as part of this motion, that we put the 173 agreement to the owners and let's see how they respond. They can either say yes or they can say no. But let them put that, let us put that forward to them, make that part of our dialogue, and then let's get a response from the owners. I think it's a good way forward. I think it protects the market, because the market is a valuable asset to this city. It's the economic lifeblood of the Preston precinct.
All right, thank you, Councillor Greta.
Just a question, Mr. Mayor, in relation to the 173 agreement, can we actually impose one lacking that of a planning permit or planning application in front of us? Just a question to the officers. If there's no planning application in front of us, can we actually introduce one?
Number 3 actually doesn't seek to impose, but rather seek cooperation with. So it says here, propose to the owners whether they would commit.
If that's the case, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to add point 5, if the movement sector will be happy to consider. First of all, I don't believe everything I read in the papers, so in light of what Councillor Greco said, I hope it is true, but I think it's also important to gauge goodwill from the owners of market, that council officers invite the market owners to present a briefing to council on its future consideration, its future use on the market site.
Is that okay with... Can I hear the wording of that?
I just don't understand. Try the last sentence. Council officers invite the market owners to present a briefing to council on its future use on the market site. Future uses on the market site.
Well, I suppose it is in that cooperative sense. They might as well come back to us. They have previously come, so that's okay?
Yeah, that's no problem.
Okay.
We're asked to dialogue. That's the whole purpose.
I think we should.
All right, so that's accepted by the mover. Who was the seconder? Sorry, I missed that. Councillor McCarthy, thank you. Just waiting just for a couple of minutes. So, Councillor Fontana, if I can give you the call?
To do what?
Just speak to your amendment, because it has been accepted by the mover.
And I thank the movement sector. I think it's very important to have that dialogue which we've spoken about before, and not hear second-hand information here and there. If we're serious about retaining the fresh food aspect of the market, well, we need to hear it from the horse's mouth. We need to actually engage with them in discussion, in whatever dialogue we need to ensure that this is what they want. And like Councillor Greco mentioned, there's a lot of jobs at stake here. Preston Market is the hub of the area, and we also want to retain that fresh food aspect, which is critical to not only the job here, but also to this little civic area here too. So if we can hear it from them, it would be great. And remove any doubt, and any questions we may have can be answered there and then, instead of exchanging through officers, which could get lost in trends.
Right. Well, I propose to put that to vote. I think we're on the same page on this one. Yes. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. Now, 9.7 also in your name, Councillor Greer.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'd just like to...
Second to Mr. Mayor, if that's okay, with an additional point D.
Yep,
Councillor Greco would like me to read it out. I welcome this, and also point D, because this has come fairly sudden. I don't think all our officers are up to date. Point D to read, facilitate such a forum when our officers and staff have all information and details at their disposal.
So can you repeat that, Carl?
Facilitate such a forum when our officers and staff have all information and details at their disposal. I don't think they're quite ready to engage.
No problem. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So
I thought that would have been implicit, but I'm glad that you put it there.
Make it clear, make it simple.
yes. All right. So we've got a mover and seconder. Councillor
Yeah,
Rio.
okay. Look, and again, I'll move this just with just a slight alteration. In point 2 where it says it should not say organised, but it should say organised. But preceding those words, with the assistance of the local government Victoria organised community forums too. And I take that suggestion from the governance officer.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. So what this motion does is that there's an important review currently being undertaken in the local government. And we're as a local government, we're governed by an act which was enacted back in 1989, and it's over it's over 25 years old. And what the government is doing is actually reviewing lock, stock and barrel that particular act. It's actually trying to bring councils into the 21st century by a complete review of the Act. What a complete review of the Act means is that a review of the functions and purpose of council and the overall the operations of council. And I think that's important in regards to the council's accountability, council issues in relation to democracy, local democracy, council issues in relation to governance, which has been a big matter in regards to this council. So I think it's important that, given that the local government is undertaking that review, and the local government is actually encouraging the community to partake and provide input into the review process, I think we should facilitate that with our community. And so by holding a series of forums, we're able to capture some of the ideas and some of the views from the community and actually package those and deliver those and make a submission to the local government of Victoria. So it's fairly straightforward. It will require a bit of work on our part, but I think it's important that we do this work because it also gives the community a chance to have a say about the rules under which we operate and how they would like to see council operate in future.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Gregor. Okay. I propose to put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Also, in your name, Councillor Greco, 9.8.
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, look, Mr. Mayor, the motion is quite self-explanatory, and this is about the children in the detention centres. We've just heard recently, which is quite encouraging. To me, it's sort of it gives me belief in humanity when I hear things like this. Is that the doctors of the Children's Hospital are refusing to send back children that are under their care to discharge them back to the offshore detention centres. And I think that that's a very courageous act by the doctors, which has been backed by the Australian Medical Association, and it's also been backed by other associations of physicians and things like that. Also, the State Minister for Health has backed the court. State government's behind supporting that. The board of the Children's Hospital, and you would think a board is not a radical body, but the board and the CEO of the board of the Children's Hospital has also backed the doctor's decision. We also have Julian Burnside that has said that if any doctors are prosecuted by the federal government in relation to this particular action that they're taking, that Julian Burnside will defend him free of charge. So there's a whole confluence of people that are applauding the decision that's been made by the Children's Hospital. And I think as a council, given that we've done a lot of work in this space, we've got a legacy that goes back a decade or two about defending the rights of asylum seekers and refugees. I think, as I said here in point 3 and 4, is that we should write to the Children's Hospital, to their board and to their CEO, congratulating them on the stance that they have taken, and for them to know that the third tier of government, or one section of the third tier government, is actually backing them. And secondly, we should write to the Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, who has changed his language in relation to detention centres and children in detention centres, and to write to Malcolm Turnbull saying that the government should reverse, that the government will reverse their decision about children in detention. So it's a gesture of solidarity for a courageous decision that has been made by the doctors of the Children's Hospital.
Very good. I should also note that the chairperson is a former health minister under Jeff Kennett, Rob Knowles.
Well, there we go.
So, cross-party in that sense.
I've got
Ms. Walsh?
I've got mixed feelings about this because I generally I don't want to see children in detention. It's a
Just point of order, Mr. Mayor. Is council speaking for or against?
I'm speaking against. I don't want to see children in detention. I guess my supports. I guess I'm funny about the term supports because the issue, although you don't want to see children in detention, and although you and they're saying it's to do it's unethical. The only issue is that we must obviously support the rule of law, and if that's a government policy, it's just a real tough issue, and I'm not sure that we should be in this space in local government. I'm speaking against it, and I'm not speaking for it. I will say.
Right.
What?
Well, look, be that as it may, I propose to put it to the vote.
Yes, please.
All those in favour? Well, you're not against, are you?
No, I'm not against.
So, just a simple abstention.
Yeah.
Fair enough. All right. That being passed, we now go to 9.9. Okay. So, Councillor McCarthy, your call?
Yep. If I've got a seconder.
Yep, seconded.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. So this proposal is really to get the ball rolling in relation to Council's position when it comes to the use of toxics like Roundup, which some councillors might be aware we have been using for some time in the city of Darebin in relation to weeds and combating weeds along our streetscapes and also in our parks and of course along our creek corridors as well. I've had quite a bit of correspondence. I understand other councillors have had correspondence as well in relation to this issue, and really on two fronts. One is the fact that and it's been brought to my attention by residents, including, and I acknowledge Ms. Lethbridge here tonight as well, who's written to me along with other residents, bringing to my attention that European countries, European nations right now are banning the use of Roundup because of its harmful effects. Now there are various degrees of Roundup, and I don't want to get into the complex technical side of the chemical itself, but they've found that it has serious impacts and serious risks to human health, and of course also to the whole ecosystem in terms of finding its way into the water table and of course into our food as well in some cases. So whole nations are banning the supply and use of this particular product for very sound reasons. The World Health Organization has taken a very strong stance against it, and of course some city councils here in Victoria and also in New South Wales have either started to phase out the use of it altogether and are starting to experiment with alternative means for weed management. The City of Sydney and the City of Melbourne have both been undertaking what's called steam weeding, steam weeding effectively, which is a non-toxic means through which they can actually combat weeds. The City of Sydney recently held a festival to bring to their residents' attention this work that they're doing, because they're very interested in people thinking differently about their local biodiversity and of course their own health.
Councillor McCarthy, in the interest of time,
I'll keep it very quick there, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'll just make the point that
I think everyone's on
that's right. Bayside City Council's undergone this process. Yep. They've undertaken a whole review. Other councils have as well. Our council has undertaken some trials in this space. This is simply for council to start the ball rolling, look at what our duty of care is, and of course undertake by early 2016 to have a report into a revised policy position. Right. I'll end it there, Mr. Mayor, on that basis.
Now, I'm going to put it to the vote.
Yep.
All those in favour? Right. And that's carried unanimously. Can I, with your indulgence, Councillor McCarthy, I don't think that one's too controversial. I propose to put that one too. 9.10.
The next one? Yep, if I've got a seconder.
Yeah, I'll second it with an amendment.
Oh, sorry,
Because I've actually had an amendment, Mr Mayor.
I want to second it.
But the amendment's already...
If we can put...
I had an amendment, that's why.
Yes.
Just to expedite things.
Let's put the amendment up. If that's okay with the mover?
That's fine, yep.
Okay, I'm proposed to put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Now, also in the interest of time, you can, but if I can find out where we are.
Mr Mayor, I've got an item of urgent business.
Mr.
There is one urgent item from Councillor McCarthy.
Let's hope it's not too urgent for us to move it without speaking. Can we please have it on screen?
What is the
Oh my God.
Oh my goodness.
Oh God, did this come around today?
No. It's that urgent, but it's
Is it an urgent?
It's that urgent.
Is it urgent? We're having
It's an urgent, is it an urgent?
It's an urgent. Just by way of explanation as to why this is
happy to
urgent. It's
I've got to read it.
No, this is too detailed to...
Council does not support, we've got it with England.
Councillor McCarthy, I'm going to ask you a favour.
Circulated.
And I think for the benefit of all councillors, I mean, it might have been technically acceptable to our officers, but I don't think something as important as can be rushed. I'm going to ask you to withdraw it and have it come back to us at a time when all councillors have had an opportunity to read 20 points.
Okay, I'll just note, Mr Mayor, that we have, and that's fine, most of them are actually noting a series of facts, but that's fine. We don't have our next council meeting until mid-November. Submissions are due, so I will bring it back for that meeting with an understanding that our officers will have a very short time period to prepare the submission, which is flagged in point 5.
Thank you.
They'll have 2 weeks, so I'll withdraw it on that basis.
Thank you very much for that.
Getting more support.
No. Okay, so now, we have no urgent items thereafter. Now I'm going to ask for a very special favour, because we do have an urgent item under confidential. I've had a quick read of the 5 general business items. They seem pretty good. I propose, with your indulgence, councillors, to put them on block.
Can we see the slides?
I can read them.
I know mine.
No, about the screen. I'll read them. This one in the name of Councillor Walsh. The council received a report on the possibility of increasing beautification works at Darwin Parklands.
Did it say the dates?
No. I mean, you can't force the date, Councillor Walsh, because it's in the cycle. It may come back after the new mayor's elected.
Seconded.
We'll just wait, Councillor Walsh, please. Now, in your name, Councillor Greco, the council, 1, notes the mayor's positive comments in the 14-15 annual report regarding our participatory budget initiative using a citizens' jury process, which according to the mayor has been a fantastic way of directly involving our community in the work of council, and that we look forward to doing it again soon. 2, receive a report well in time for next year's budget deliberation process on undertaking another round of participatory budgeting. 3rd one is in Councillor Walsh's name. The council, 1, Council notes the Abbott Turnbull Government's Green Army Environmental Scheme for local environmental projects. 2, that officers provide a report at a briefing in November updating Council on what projects in Darebin may be eligible for Green Army funding. 3, officers may consider potential projects on the Mary and Darebin Creeks, e.g. the Mary Creek Footbridge. And the last item, also in Councillor Walsh's name, that officers prepare an urgent report for the council briefing in November on establishing a North Thornbury Traders Association. So they look pretty good. And if if everyone's happy, I'll propose to have you, Councillor McCarthy, as a mover, Councillor Walsh as a seconder.
I won't move that.
For consideration that all 5 get considered to be moved on block.
Move them on block. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so I'll put them to the vote. All those in favour? Okay, carried. Now, can I take a mover and a seconder to move all 5 on block?
I'll move all 5 on block.
Councillor Walsh moves. Councillor Fontana seconds. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to ask you to excuse us as we receive a motion to go in camera. Mover Councillor Fontana, Councillor Greco seconds. Put that to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you very much. We'll catch up with you very shortly because we've only got one item.
Mr. Mayor, you might wish to let members of the gallery know that they've got
yes, please join us. Mr. Rocky, I'm sure we'll look after him. And yes.
Right.